Moonlight played on the window glass. A girl was sleeping on the bed. The light of the moon played in her scattering of hair, gently illuminating her figure. The girl opened her eyes. She suddenly realized that the surrounding objects were familiar to her. She recognized her childhood room. It all made her wonder how she ended up here and what it meant. Rihanna turned her head and saw the mourning dress. She remembered wearing it to her mother's funeral. She was 12 years old then. She only wore it once in her life. That's why I was surprised to see this outfit. What did it all mean? That it was a dream? Because the situation was more like an illusion than reality. Rihanna looked at the door, and she thought that if she really returned to the past, then someone would knock. The girl heard a knock on the door. The voice asked if she was awake. It was Mary. She was worried about the girl. The nanny understood that the girl felt sadness in her soul from the loss of her mother. The woman tried to console the child. Without her support, Rihanna would feel worse. The maid gently wiped the tears from the girl's eyes. She tried to cheer up the child and was afraid that she would get sick. Our heroine realized that she had returned to the past. Her heart was filled with anxiety and amazement. Mary, like a devoted servant, took care of Rihanna. It has been this way since she was a child, never missing a day. Every morning the nanny was nearby. She helped the girl wake up and greet a new day. The little girl recalled with warmth how they looked after her as a child. Her heart was filled with joy from pleasant memories. She was happy to be with such a kind nanny. Rihanna remembered that Mary would later be kicked out for falsely accusing her of stealing jewelry. She will leave, shrouded in sadness. This will be a very unfair situation, and then the nanny will be left alone. And now the girl was very glad to meet Mary. She missed her very much. The maid tried to calm the girl down. She thought she had a bad dream. The nanny gently hugged and calmed the child. The woman tried to assure the girl of her support and her father's love. Mary asked her not to worry, and she said that everything would be fine. But the heroine understood that this would not happen. The father will bring his illegitimate child into the house, and that evil woman. Rihanna understood that they would take everything from her, including my father. So she was worried about it. The maid said that the count would come soon. That's why the couple got ready. But Mary did not know where he went after the funeral. She was sure that he would return home today. Mary wiped the child's face. Suddenly, the girl asked to find a lawyer. Mary was very surprised by this request. She asked again if we were talking about Mr. Ned. The maid could not understand why the girl needed him, but Rihanna began to rush the nanny. She said there was no time for explanations. The girl wanted to check something before her father returned. Mary replied that it was unlikely that she would be able to meet with a lawyer now. The girl asked the reason. She had a very surprised and pleading look. In the end, Mary replied in a friendly manner that everything would be done. She repeated this phrase again and asked to wait a little. The door to the room closed. The heroine closed her eyes and began to think. Yesterday was her mother's funeral. Soon her father, Count Allison, will bring his illegitimate child. She was worried that because of this all her misfortunes would begin again. And all because she returned to the past. Her gaze became sad. But perhaps this is a blessing from God. She didn't know how to understand this and whether there was a chance to change everything. The girl looked at the dress again. There were many questions and thoughts in her head. And then she decided for herself that enough suffering was enough. The Countess decided that she would never suffer again. So she decided, looking at her reflection in the mirror. She wanted the one she now sees in the reflection to live a different life. The weather was sunny outside. The carriage drove up to the house. The sound of horses' hooves could be heard. The Count told Letitia that he was glad that they would live together. The girl was also happy. She thought that now she would live like in a fairy tale, because he will live with his father. The long-haired, red-haired, spoiled girl showed joy with all her appearance. Her father hugged her with all tenderness. He believed that if it were not for his wife, they would have lived together long ago and happily. The man would like to take his daughter and her mother much earlier. Letitia's mother always assured that the Count would not abandon them, that he will definitely take them to him. And the girl believed it. She hugged her father more and more every minute. Her father whispered to her that he loved her very much. He said that he had another daughter, but he only loved Letitia. The girl also loved her father very much. She had been waiting all her life to be able to live with him. The carriage drove closer and closer to the house. The girl looked out the window at her new home. It seemed that this was the happiest hour of her life. She was looking forward to this day so much. And now everything will be hers. Only her. She used to live in a house where toys had to be shared with others. How she didn't love it. The nanny often scolded her for this. And she explained that even if you really want it, you still can't take away someone else's property. Often these teachings caused dissatisfaction in the child. The father asked Lutetia to wait a little longer. He explained that his wife was seriously ill. Therefore, soon after her death, he will be able to take the child to him. With deep hope, the girl waited for the time when her father could take her home. And in the word die, there was hope for her. If the Countess leaves this world, then the girl will finally be able to leave with her dad. Years passed in deep anticipation. Lutetia was waiting for this time to come sooner. She really wanted the Countess to die quickly. The child's eyes shone with joy as she imagined this time. And then one day her father told her the news that he was taking her to live with him. Finally they arrived at the house. They also went in together. The father held his beloved daughter tightly by the hand. The weather seemed to rejoice along with them. Servants were waiting for them near the house. They said words of greeting. This was her home now. This joyful moment has finally arrived. How happy they were. All the servants greeted the Count, even Geoffrey. True, he asked what kind of girl came with him, and Alessan proudly replied that it was his daughter. The red-haired beauty of the city stood in full view of everyone. Previously, she could not appear in this house, but now everything is different. Geoffrey at first did not understand what the Count was talking about. At that moment, the sound of footsteps was heard. It was Rihanna coming down. She looked at those around her with a cold gaze, especially the father and the red-haired girl. The father called the eldest daughter to come down and come over. He wanted to introduce her to his youngest daughter. In response, he heard an order to get out. The father was at a loss. And again the order was given to get out of the house. "Clean up with your daughter." The father looked at the girl with bewilderment. The red-haired girl didn't expect this either. Fear was visible in her eyes. A few hours earlier, a lawyer had been in the estate's living room. He came at the request of the younger countess. Rihanna was looking forward to it. The lawyer sat down at the table and treated himself to tea. The girl was always quiet. Therefore, the suddenness of the meeting with the lawyer surprised Ned. The heroine wanted to see her mother's marriage contract. She wanted to know about her inheritance. Ned nearly choked on his tea in surprise upon hearing this request. But the girl insisted that the lawyer now assure her right to inheritance. She wanted a new guardian appointed. The lawyer was surprised why the girl was in such a hurry. After all, the Count has not arrived yet. However, the young countess threatened that if he refused to comply with her request, she would accuse her father and the lawyer of tax evasion. Such assertiveness alarmed the lawyer. He couldn't understand how such a thing could have occurred to her. It seemed amazing to him that a 12-year-old girl could say such a thing. She said she understood the surprise of others if she accused her father. But she wanted to tell her godmother, the Queen, about this. And then the investigation would be carried out very carefully. The lawyer realized that it was better not to quarrel with the Queen. This could end badly for him. After all, everyone knows that tax evasion and treason against the royal family can land you in jail. Both Rihanna and the lawyer knew about this. So when her father came, she was very brave. She was not afraid to tell him this news to his face. The words addressed to the Count were a surprise to everyone. At first, he tried to scold the girl in front of everyone and yell at her. In response, the Countess took out the will. She said that they had completed all the necessary procedures with the lawyer. The servants were surprised. Now the only owner of the house was the young Countess. The heroine held the document in her hands. Rihanna Alanissan. It was she who received the estate from her mother by right. The red-haired girl became more and more afraid. It seemed that her dream had collapsed. What she has dreamed about for these many years will now not come true. There was sadness in the eyes. The Count could not understand what rights his daughter was talking about. He thought she was crazy. The young Countess called Geoffrey. He obediently obeyed and approached. Rihanna asked him to check this document and let the Count look at it. She held out her hand with the sheet for Geoffrey, and he took it. The document stated that if the marriage between Regan Allison and Anastasia Privius was dissolved, then all their property would be transferred to the state. The Count bowed his head upon hearing this. The only heirs can be the children of Anastasia Privius. Therefore, her own daughter Rihanna Allison receives the title and all the property. The document is recognized as valid by Allison's family lawyer. The Count gritted his teeth tightly in rage. Geoffrey was surprised. but at the same time glad that his young mistress now owned the estate. The Count went up the stairs to look at the document. The man was unusually surprised by what was taken away. In a fit of anger, the Count tore the document. He told Rihanna that her rights were not important to him. The Count believed that his eldest daughter could not use her own property independently until she came of age. He said that his daughter should obey him like her father, and he believed that it was the parents who decided to live or die for their children. But the girl replied that he had not fully read the contract. This marriage was between the people of Arundel and Crichton. In this case, the child can choose his own guardian, and she chose her uncle from Crichton as her guardian. This meant that her father could no longer give her orders. The Count's eyes were full of anger. These words also surprised the servants standing nearby, including Geoffrey and the girl's nanny, Mary. The Earl was very surprised how his daughter could give his property to the Crichtons, but the girl repeated again that he no longer had any rights here. She ordered the father to take his child and get out of the house. Letitia stood nearby. She understood that her dream was destroyed. The red-haired girl stood and looked at everyone with frightened eyes. At that moment, the Count swung his hand at Rihanna. She was ready for her father to hit her. But then Mary came up and shielded the girl. The father's blow fell on the nanny. The girl ran to her protector to help her come to her senses. Geoffrey reprimanded the Count for this action, but Allison said that if he didn't want to get it too, he shouldn't stand in his way. Geoffrey was fearless. The servant boldly declared that an honest person should stop violence and would not allow the Count to behave in such a way. Allison was angry. He was surprised how Geoffrey's servant dared to behave like that. Other servants observed this situation. The Count asked that Geoffrey be taken away from him, but the servant simply continued to stand and did not respond to the request. And then everyone heard the loud word, "Attention." It was the voice of the young countess. The servants looked at her. She ordered everyone, as the new mistress, to remove the Count and his child from the estate. The servants took her father's hands to lead him out of the house. But the red-haired girl turned to the heroine. She pitifully called her her sister. Rihanna said she doesn't consider her a sister. She remembered her past childhood and how evil Letitia was. She always wanted to be in Rihanna's place, and all her life she disliked her older sister. At this moment, Letitia reminded her sister that they had the same father. She looked at her older sister with pitiful eyes. The red-haired girl asked not to kick them out. Rihanna looked at Letitia and her outfit. She said that the dress she came in was sewn for her by her mother when she was alive. This dress was very expensive for the young countess. Letizia said that her father gave her this dress. The countess replied that the girl would only receive this dress from her, but she can live with her father as they wanted. Rihanna once again asked her father and Letizia to vacate the house. When they left, the countess closed the door. The father and the girl were standing on the street. At this time, Mary and Rihanna were sitting in the living room. The girl was surprised why the nanny stood up for her. And why did she take the blow? It was stupid in the eyes of the heroine. But the nanny replied that the young countess was still small, that no child should be punished like this by their parents. If the Count had hit his daughter, she would probably have been in great pain. Reasoning this way, the nanny wanted to protect the child. She believed that anyone in her place would have done the same. It was obvious to her. Suddenly, the young countess invited her nanny to go with her to Crichton. She was surprised why the girl wanted to go there, but the Duchess repeated that they needed to leave as soon as possible. She asked the nanny if she would go with her. Mary was born in Arundel. She was an orphan, but worked as a servant to Anastasia, who saw talent in her. Later, she began to serve Rihanna. The girl said that Mary could stay here too, and if she wanted to work elsewhere, the Countess was ready to write a letter of recommendation. But the nanny promised to always be with the girl. The child was very happy about this. Mary had no family, so she wanted to serve the girl. The woman suggested that she warn the queen before leaving for Crichton. Otherwise, she would have been upset that they didn't say goodbye to her. Rihanna agreed. The queen's name was Hertzia Cheska. During the civil war for the throne, she fought on the battlefield as an army commander. Hertzia stopped the rebellion of the aristocrats. This is a queen with incredible power. Rihanna once loved her son. In the past, Hertzia became a mother to Rihanna. The girl remembered how she met Hertzia's son. He and his mother went to the queen. When we met, everyone greeted each other warmly. At that time, they had not seen each other for a long time. But the queen understood that Anastasia's health was most important. They were glad to see each other. The queen invited guests to her summer garden. In the middle of the garden, there was a beautiful gazebo. The queen prepared special cookies for them. The girl loved him very much, so she was grateful to Hersia for the treat. The queen saw that the girl was growing up to be as beautiful as her mother. The women sat down in the gazebo, and the girl went for a walk in the garden. There were beautiful butterflies in the garden, but later the heroine saw an unusual golden bird sitting on a tree. The bird got entangled in the branches. The little countess wanted to help her but did not know how. Suddenly, the girl heard a request to leave the bird. Turning around, Rihanna saw a handsome boy. It was an unexpected meeting. The heroine decided to meet him. She asked the boy who he was, but in response she heard words of surprise. At that moment, the bird wanted to fly away. But because she was entangled in the foliage, she could not do this. Rihanna really wanted to help her. The boy drew the attention of his new acquaintance to the fact that a cat was climbing up a tree. The hero believed that there was no point in helping the bird, since its fate was decided. It would soon be eaten. The girl cried because of this. The boy tried to calm her down, otherwise everyone would have thought that he was the reason for her tears. So the hero realized that he needed to save the bird. He tried to climb a tree. At this time, the cat approached the bird. The boy grabbed the bird and a branch broke under the cat. All three of them fell to the ground. The girl ran up to her new friend. He rose from the ground and the cat ran away from them. The boy had a bird in his hands which he had saved. He let her go and she flew up. During the flight, the bird dropped one feather. It was bright golden in color and fell right on the girl's head. The feather attracted the heroine's attention. The boy was surprised why he risked his life, and the girl didn't even look at him after that. Rihanna showed him the feather. This bird was Artaxia. In Arendelle, she is called Artaxia, and in Crichton, she is called Master. They said that these birds were magical. They could live both in the human world and in heaven. These birds were no different from ordinary birds while they were in the human world. But in the sky, their wings become large and shining. Legend said that whoever caught Atraxia's feather would be granted one wish. The girl said that she saw the bird grow in size in the sky, begin to sparkle brightly and fly away. The hero was very surprised by this story, and believed that it was a real miracle. Rihanna was completely sure that this bird was Atraxia. The boy expressed surprise that Rihanna didn't ask if he was okay after the fall. The girl handed the hero a feather and offered to take it. She said that this feather could fulfill any of his wishes, and all because he saved the bird. The boy asked if the wish would really come true later. Rihanna said that Dima succeeded. You need to hold the pen in front of you and ask with all your heart for what you want. The hero decided to find out who Dima is. It was the heroine's cousin. The boy handed the feather back to Rihanna. Because of this, she thought that the boy did not like the feather, but he said that if it weren't for the heroine, he wouldn't even think about saving this bird. Therefore, he wants to give the feather to his new friend. She was very grateful for the gift. She asked the boy's name again. His name was Igor. He was the son of Hertia and the future king. When the boy was 12 years old, he became very ill. For a long time, doctors did not know how to help him. His temperature did not drop for 4 days. No medicine helped. But one day a doctor was found who could help Igor. He gave the boy medicine, and all that remained was to wait for the temperature to subside. The queen spent all the days of his illness next to him. She was very afraid that the boy would die. 2 days later, it was all gone. The temperature had subsided and he was expected to make a full recovery soon, and all he needed was rest. The queen decided that after this she needed to marry her son as quickly as possible, but the boy was still young. Perhaps it was too early to think about marriage. Many were surprised by the queen's decision, especially the Marquise Rozan, who was her close servant. Hertia explained that Igor could die suddenly, which is why she made this decision. Otherwise they could lose the throne. The queen wanted her son to have children as quickly as possible. Aristocrats are hostile to the royal family. Therefore, you need to prepare in advance for the fact that her son may make a mistake, and this threatens the loss of power for which they have fought for so long. The boy accidentally overheard this conversation when, walking through the palace, he was looking for his mother. He couldn't understand what kind of mistake he was talking about. He believed that since the throne belonged only to him, everyone should obey him. It turns out that he is just a replacement for his mother. Next, outside the door, they began to discuss who might be suitable as a bride. This had to be a man the queen trusted, which means it must be Anastasia's daughter. The girl was the queen's goddaughter. Hertia asked the woman to bring her daughter. If Rihanna and Igor had spent a lot of time together since childhood, it could easily have progressed to marriage. The queen sent Anastasia a letter of invitation. Hearing this, Igor decided to leave the palace. He couldn't understand why the queen wanted him to get married quickly and have children. The hero felt that he was perceived as an animal. These thoughts haunted him and brought him to tears. The boy had bitterness and resentment in his soul. He remembered the phrase that the aristocrats were hostile towards him and his mother. It was these words that gave the boy the most pain. He felt like a puppet. And then he decided for himself that if he marries the one whom his mother chose for him, he would never love this girl. Even if it is the daughter of Countess Allison, Rihanna. The young prince again recalled his meeting with the girl and how his mother introduced them. 5 years have passed since then. Igor was in the girl's arms. Suddenly, he was very surprised how he could allow this to happen. But it was so warm and pleasant with her. The beauty woke up and looked at him with loving eyes. And then Igor woke up. He believed that the dream he had just seen was very terrible. The prince believed that he could not allow this to happen in real life. What he feared most was that it would become true. The queen believed that her son was very lucky to have his bride. Hertzia reminded Igor that he liked the girl. The 19-year-old boy understood that everything was decided for him, and the mother repeated that she was worried about her son, and that she wants him to have a girl who suits him best. Rihanna, in her opinion, was the best candidate. The queen could not understand why her son was resisting. This disagreement alienated the son and mother from each other. The young countess arrived. The guy asked if she heard about his conversation with his mother. He said that he had a strained relationship with his mother, and he believed that the girl should know about it. The prince asked her to think about whether she was really suitable for the role of queen. Rihanna was surprised by this question. She did not expect to hear him and wanted to ask Igor what he meant, but he turned his back and left. The queen called the girl to her. She obediently approached and greeted her godmother with a bow. The queen said that the girl was already quite an adult. Hertzia believed that a girl should have someone instead of her mother, a person who will help and teach etiquette. Therefore, the queen introduced the heroine to Countess Igail. The countess agreed to serve Lady Rihanna faithfully. Since the girl now lived in the palace, she should know etiquette well. After all, she is the future queen. Hertzia also clarified whether Rihanna would agree to give her an heir in the future. The girl agreed to this. The wedding is due in a month. However, Igor continues to put it off. He told everyone that he was busy with other things. The girl was very upset by this. She couldn't understand how Igor could ignore such an important event. And the queen was glad that Rihanna would become like a daughter to her. If the girl had listened to her, life in the palace would not have burdened anyone. Rihanna bowed deeply to the queen as a sign of respect and left the room. The wedding was supposed to take place in a month, and the bride had to prepare everything herself. She also had to memorize the history of the entire royal family. It was also necessary to know all the aristocrats. Countess Igail was preparing a dress for Rihanna. The girl was thin, but that was still not enough. She did not have a beautiful figure. The countess began teaching Rihanna manners. I had to raise my head higher. She said that if she wanted to become a queen, she had to straighten her back and push her chest forward. I believed that the straighter the back, the clearer the thoughts were. Soon the dress for the wedding was ready. The bride was dressed very beautifully, but her gaze remained sad. She understood that the groom did not want this wedding and was avoiding it in every possible way. The ceremony took place in the temple. Before the face of God they were called husband and wife. What both of them so much did not want happened, and only the queen rejoiced at this wedding. On the contrary, the bride and groom were upset. They didn't even hold each other's hands. As they left the temple, they were greeted by guests. The girl, now with her husband, went to the royal chambers. The marriage of the king and queen consort was consummated. But they didn't love each other. Tonight is their first night together. In the room, the guy and girl who had recently become husband and wife had mixed feelings. Both of them were filled with fear and embarrassment, not knowing how to behave at this moment. They tried to awkwardly avoid each other's gaze, but it didn't work. Everyone experienced mixed feelings of fear and uncertainty. But nothing could be changed. This is life, and it doesn't always work out the way we want it. They understood that this night would remain in their memory for a long time, and they realized the importance of the future that they had to share. He stroked her hair tenderly, trying to calm her anxiety, while she continued to be afraid. Igor understood that now this girl had probably become his wife. Both felt awkward. She covered her face and turned away. It didn't get off to a good start, but she was the only one with whom he would have to live together. He pulled her close to him. Their hearts beat to the beat. Rihanna became his wife by the queen's choice, and now they will share body and soul until the end of their days. Igor understood that his wife was embarrassed because so many eyes were directed at them, and maybe she will now be on his side. He kissed the girl tenderly. She was very scared. She turned her gaze away from her husband and pushed him away. This was her response to his attention. The young countess refused him. It was a marriage of puppets. Nothing new. The queen was surprised by her goddaughter's refusal on the first night. The girl understood that her husband would not be kind to her despite the witnesses. If she leaves before a relationship is formed between them, she can end the marriage. Then Igor will avoid an unwanted marriage. Rihanna didn't want to live with a man who didn't love her. She would prefer to live in a monastery. Igor could not accept his wife's refusal and decided to take her by force. The wife had to endure it, even if she didn't like it. He reminded her that if she refused, the marriage would be over. The prince began to kiss his wife. The light went out. The guests left. The girl lay with tears in her eyes. Igor was upset that he had to take possession of his wife against her will on their very first night together. He couldn't sleep for a long time because he was upset. The guy decided that today was the last day he would endure his wife's tears. Now she must take responsibility for her choices, even if it hurts her. Rihanna also didn't fall asleep for a long time. Subsequent fulfillment of marital duty was mandatory. If the wife did not do this on the appointed day, then the queen and aristocrats could accuse her of dereliction of duty. Therefore, the couple spent their nights in anxiety and tension. It was strange. Is this really how marriage should be? Once in the royal library, Igor talked with Basil. The guy asked the servant how long he had been married to his wife. He replied that it had been 3 years already. But before that, they dated for 10 years. However, they are still like newlyweds. Basil asked why the guy was interested in this, but he again asked the question, what would happen if the person with whom he had been with for more than 10 years lied to him? The servant was very surprised by this question. He believed that this could not be. His wife would never cheat on him. He considered her a holy person. Next, Igor took the tax report. This is a list of aristocrats who have not paid taxes for the past 10 years. Basil realized that he had been deceived. Most of the people on the list are related to the Queen Dowager. However, they had many people on their side. The guy was determined to grab his opponents by the throat. But there was one problem with Count Allison. And if the Queen Dowager's power was not enough to control those close to her, it could anger her. The guy was surprised why the servant was afraid before starting the business. After all, tax fraud was considered a great sin. The queen was sitting in her room. She learned from her son that some of the aristocrats on this list did not pay a large amount. Hersha understood that this undermined the foundations of the state. Therefore, it was necessary to take advantage of the opportunity and warn the aristocrats. But then the queen realized that Count Allison had also withheld a large sum of money. The queen consort's family cannot be allowed to commit such crimes. The count needs to be sent to jail and deprived of his title. The queen suggested that her son break off his marriage to Rihanna. Igor was very surprised by this. He didn't understand why his mother wanted to overthrow Rihanna. But he realized that the queen was trying to protect her people. The guy assumed that his wife might be somehow involved in this. Since the girl was the queen's goddaughter, she should be under her protection. The hero suggested that punishing the count would be enough. However, Herdia said that she was not going to protect her goddaughter. You need to separate your personal life and your responsibilities. Because of Rihanna, people could doubt the work of the ruler. The queen had to be perfect, and also be ready to sacrifice yourself for the sake of the king at any moment. And the girl was a pawn from the very beginning. This decision needed to be thought through. The guy was confused. He decided that everyone on the list would get off with a fine, although that would also be a defeat. But the servant reminded that this was just the beginning. And then the decisions will be harder, and that was true. Igor was very upset. He turned to the window and saw his wife walking in the park. He didn't know if he could just let her go, and why exactly she became the reason for his failure. But if the girl only knew this. Rihanna walked through the park, periodically looking back. She saw her husband's reflection in the window. Her presence confused the guy even more. A month later, there was a banquet. The queen, her son, and his wife were sitting at the table. They drank excellent wine, which went well with dinner. It was made from selected Toulouse grapes. The Empire of Toulouse is a new religious state. Arendelle and Crichton had long been at odds over border disputes. The Toulouse Empire is located in the center of the mainland. Arendelle's only trade route was overland and could always be lost as it passed through Toulouse. It was necessary to carefully monitor the situation. Therefore, Igor always avoided conflicts with Toulouse and tried to develop trade sea routes. The queen heard that her son became interested in maritime trade. She asked her son if he knew about Crichton's shipbuilding. He replied that he needed to strengthen his sea routes through active trade, and therefore he is already familiar with construction. The guy understood what his mother was thinking, but the problem lay in Toulouse. He was very passionate about the sea because of this empire. But this was not to undermine Arendelle. The servant reminded those present that they had an ally on the sea, Crichton. But I didn't know whether going to sea was now necessary. After all, the queen is the heiress of the Crichton and Arendelle family. Therefore, you don't have to think about the sea as long as there is a queen, a symbol of the strong union of the two countries. The Toulouse Empire expanded its power at an alarming rate. Therefore, you need to know when Toulouse wine in a glass becomes poison. Now was the time not for trading, but for reducing risks. And then the young king dropped the glass from his hands. Some thought the wine was too strong, but this could not be. The hot blood of the young ruler could not overcome the wine. The queen was most surprised by this. She hoped that her son would please her and direct his hot young blood to the birth of a successor. But what does the young queen consort think about this? Does she agree with this? Igor realized that among those around him there was not a single person who would be on his side. This made the guy leave lunch. He felt lost. No one could understand his inner world. The loud sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. At the same time, his wife Rihanna was running down the corridor. She called him and asked him to stop. He felt anxiety creeping up on him. Stopping, he turned around. His gaze was cold. She wanted to thank him for the last time Igor saved her father. But the guy just shrugged. His eyes expressed displeasure and disappointment. He couldn't believe he was being thanked for an action he so regretted. The attempt at conversation was in vain. The guy did not want to listen. Igor believed that his wife was on his mother's side, not his. Turning to the door, he wanted to leave, but Rihanna grabbed his hand. The hero turned around sharply, his gaze wary. He refused to listen to her excuses and insults. Igor felt that his mother meant more to his wife than he did, so he wanted to end the conversation. But Rihanna just wanted to explain everything. Igor grabbed his wife's hand and began to drag her into the room. The girl felt fear that was slowly taking over her. Realizing that she could not calm the guy down. She just wanted to explain but couldn't say a word. The realization that she had made a mistake somewhere flared up in her soul, and tears flowed down her cheeks. The hero again repeated that this marriage was the wife's choice, but she knew that it was not so. From the very beginning, she had no choice. She was like a pawn in a game, moved by the hands of others. The words spoken earlier came to mind again. You need to know when the wine in your glass becomes poison. I hope you will please me and direct your hot young blood to the birth of a successor. Igor hugged his wife, took her in his arms and carried her into the room. She was unconscious, but perhaps she was just sleeping. The light of a falling star could be seen in the window. Was this really a dream? Rihanna woke up this morning. The room was filled with sunlight. Rihanna looked at the warm rays. Her arms were bruised. The girl did not want to tolerate this attitude towards herself anymore. She couldn't understand why this was happening. Perhaps it was a dream after all. She turned away from the window and wrapped herself in a blanket. Next, we are transported to the queen's office. There was a bouquet of red roses on her table. She loved these flowers very much. The rose has a rich color and a wonderful aroma. Her son was also in the office. For the case of tax evasion, the nobility again made a fuss regarding the heirs. Although they always do this. This situation was very stressful for Igor. My marriage to Rihanna was already 3 years old. However, there were no heirs yet. The queen couldn't understand why her son didn't think about it. But he believed that he was still young, so he didn't have to worry about it. Perhaps he was the only one who thought so. Hertia knew that her son had not been in his wife's chambers since the last banquet. She wondered why the king leaves his wife whenever he pleases. However, Rihanna doesn't want to be ousted. The queen invited her son to meet his wife's sister. After all, later one could say that the unborn child is Rihanna's child. However, Igor did not like either Count Allison or his wife. If a guy would like to protect his wife, then the heir must be of the same blood as her. And the count agreed with this. Igor felt like a cat for breeding. The queen begged her son to accept this proposal because his wife also wanted it. The hero understood that his mother was thinking about how to act for the good. But soon she will be thrown out and she will lose everything. However, the guy had already prepared for this. At this time, the queen consort arrived. It was just in time. The guy was surprised by her arrival and the fact that she offered to invite her sister to the ball. Igor had to dance the first dance with her. Since Laetitia is a debutante, it will be difficult for her to find a suitable partner. Besides, it would be an important event for my sister. The guy couldn't understand how his wife agreed to her mother's proposal so quickly. He clarified whether the wife discussed this issue with her relatives. However, the father had already agreed to this. The hero had no choice but to agree. The day of the ball has arrived. The young king stood next to Laetitia. The first dance was theirs. It was delicious. The girl was glad of this opportunity. After all, she just debuted and is already dancing with the king. Those around him thought that he liked the girl. But is this permissible? Rihanna was also in the audience. She watched what was happening carefully, and her husband and sister danced beautifully in front of everyone. The heroine stood alone. She didn't regret this. Her sister considered this a victory. Rihanna was overcome with sadness and left the hall. The girl went into the garden. She approached the tree. It was to the tree near which she met her husband. The heroine remembered that acquaintance and the pleasant emotions that she then experienced. She looked at the place where the bird once sat. Suddenly, Rihanna heard a voice. Rhea liked plump bunnies, but the best thing about rabbits is their juicy meat. It's very tasty, yum yum. This is exactly what the heroine heard and turned back. The girl saw her cousin. The heroine was very glad to meet him. It's hard to remember the last time they saw each other. Dima had flowers in his hands. The girl happily hugged her brother. The last time they saw each other was in childhood, so it was unusual to see each other as adults. The heroine really missed her brother. The last time she saw him, she said she wouldn't talk to him. This was said because he drew a beard on the girl's favorite doll. The guy gave his sister flowers. He wanted to return before she returned, but did not have time. No one expected that they would not see each other for so long. During this time, many difficult events occurred. The girl wanted to share them with her brother, but he began to calm her down and wipe away her tears. They decided not to talk about sad things. If someone saw that the heroine was crying, they would think that her brother made her cry. But it was so. It was he who made the queen cry. Did the guy make a serious diplomatic mistake? If the girl had known that her brother would come, she would have prepared. The meeting was very unexpected, and the heroine assumed that something had happened. However, Dmitri also did not know that he would need to come so urgently. On his way to another state, he received a message and joined the delegation. At this moment, Igor approached. He said in a cold voice that he did not remember that a delegation from Creighton was sent to them. The girl did not expect to see her husband in the garden. Igor guessed that the guy next to his wife was her cousin. Now they will know each other. Dmitri arrived from a diplomatic mission from Creighton. Worried about his cousin, he decided to visit her. The audience at such a late hour and not even at the ball surprised the king. Why did it happen? This place seemed too secret for a meeting. The girl began to defend her brother in front of her husband. She tried to explain that her brother had only come to find out how she was doing. They saw each other often when they were children, but now there is no time to even arrange a meeting. The girl asked to forgive her useless brother. However, the guy called him a scoundrel. Everyone knew that he was a genius of diplomacy and constantly traveled under his last name. Was it worth leaving the situation just like that? Therefore, Igor reminded that the queen should pay more attention to organizing meetings. Yes, that's right, that's right. The reason for Igor's jealousy was also that he heard Dmitri calling his wife baby. He didn't know that this was what the girl was called as a child. The heroine was incredibly pleased to hear a tender word from her brother, and in general, she had not heard kind words addressed to her for a long time. However, the king could not leave the guy alone. He kissed his wife's hand demonstratively. He was very annoyed by his new acquaintance. Igor said that he would like to spend time alone with his wife. The brother looked at his sister, but she assured him that everything was fine. After that, the husband took her hand and dragged her away. The brother's flowers fell out of the girl's hands. She asked her husband to stop. The brother asked the guy to treat his sister accordingly. Dima wanted to protect his younger sister. Igor thanked for the instructions. However, he said that his wife is a queen, and not just a girl. Meetings like this and the use of babe nicknames should never happen again in the future. The hero also reminded that despite the relationship, Dmitri needs to remember that he is here on a diplomatic visit. Rihanna's brother could not object. He stood saddened by the humiliation. The maid, disguised behind a tree, observed the situation. The king was outraged that a diplomat from another country was receiving it. This gave him the feeling that he was not a ruler at all. The girl defended her brother, saying that he came at the invitation of the queen. This caused the hero's great anger. He picked up the royal seal and threw it onto the floor with a flourish. Next, the king decided to clarify whether there was anything connecting him with his wife other than the queen. This greatly offended the girl. Tears started flowing from her. How dare he even say such a thing? Rihanna started running from the room. The girl did not remember anything further. She only remembered the moment when the king came to her room. He knelt over her and looked at her. He seemed to regret his action. He gently took her hand to kiss it. At that moment, Rihanna woke up. The guy was glad that she came to her senses. The heroine could not understand why he was holding her hand. She thought she was just overtired. The girl apologized for appearing in front of her husband in this form. Igor was glad that his wife woke up. She couldn't understand why her husband was crying. It turns out that he didn't know how hard it was for her. It seemed that the hero did not know his wife at all. The king apologized to the girl and hugged her tightly. He promised to protect her and their child. The doctor came recently. It turns out that Rihanna is pregnant. This news came as a complete surprise to both. The girl fainted due to anemia. It appears during pregnancy. Now the heroine can't worry. The guy gently hugged his wife and tried to calm her down. The girl still did not believe in the reality of what was happening. However, she was happy to hear the news. Next, the action takes place on the estate of Count Allison. Letitia, who came from the ball, was furious. Why doesn't the king communicate with her? He danced several dances with her at the ball. The girl thought she was beautiful, and the king probably fell in love with her. He hugged her waist with his hand, and the guy's gaze pierced right through. Letitia felt his breath next to her. But Rihanna ruined everything. The girl wanted to stop the king when he went to look for his wife, but she could not. The girl was very offended that he left. In fact, she did not like her sister, being jealous of her happiness and position in society. The girl was not going to tolerate such an attitude towards herself. She was up to something. Rumors circulated throughout the kingdom about the king's affair with the queen's sister. Igor was talking to his close servant. They discussed how these rumors were ruining the queen dowager's plans. This news could make her very angry. The king did not want this to be discussed during tea. The issue with the heir had already been resolved, so it was better for all the rumors to die down. The king recalled the dance with Letitia. For a long time he could not forget this girl, her admiration for the king and what she said about her older sister. But in the end, Letitia still ended up next to the king. They ended up together. This was very inconvenient for the guy. The queen's pregnancy was ruining his mother's plans, but he was still not happy. Days and months passed. One day the queen decided to write a letter to her brother. When Dima receives the letter, he will be able to find out about the girl's pregnancy. Many congratulated the queen on her pregnancy. Hertia was overjoyed to the point of tears over this news. In her eyes, it was simply wonderful. Dima was worried about his sister's marriage, but now she was fine. The aristocrats began to treat her better, which was a great honor for her. Lately, the young queen's body seemed very heavy, so she could only read and sew clothes for the baby. It seemed to the heroine the happiest time since she became a member of the royal family. The girl couldn't wait for the baby to be born and called Dima his uncle. She did not describe anything else in the letter. She just said that she got along with her husband and that everything was great with her. She believed that the future would be even better and asked not to worry about herself. But it's true that her husband began to treat her much better, became more gentle and caring. It was clear that the guy was also waiting for the birth of his son. Many were waiting for the time when they would be able to find out whether it would be a boy or a girl. The queen wanted a boy, but the king did not care whether it was a boy or a girl, because it was his child. Although these words surprised the girl, the guy said that later she would understand their meaning. And now he's even busier. But he promised to come to his wife more often so that she would not worry. He hugged his wife tightly and kissed her forehead. She was very pleased. Then he went to deal with the important issues that occupied his thoughts. Disturbing events took place at Count Alison's estate. When Letizia found out about her sister's pregnancy, she was very angry. She did not like her sister, considering her stupid. The girl thought it was unfair that Rihanna would have a child. It is because of this that the king does not come to her. But how can he do this to her? It's very stupid. Her father was unable to calm her down. But he was hopeful that everything would change when the baby was born. Perhaps then the king will change his attitude towards the red-haired beauty. The count continued to reassure her and suggested she wait. It was the Queen Dowager who asked him to do this. You just had to wait. In the father's hand was a letter from Hertia. It was this letter that was supposed to inspire hope in the girl. Then the events moved to the royal palace. It was late in the evening when everyone was in their rooms. The countess entered the queen. Hertia asked her to do something, but it had to be done quietly. The order was carried out. Hertia was given the letter she had asked for. Now everything is ready, and you need to write a response to Count Alison. His daughter is very upset, but she was considered much smarter than her sister. The servant offered to allow the girl to visit the palace, but everything needs to be done as quickly as possible. If you were afraid of making a mistake, you could of course find another girl. But it was decided to leave everything as it was, because the job was almost done. All that was left was to pour a little oil on the fire. In the evening, the king and his faithful servant went into the forest. When the guy was riding a horse, he made a well-aimed shot forward from a bow and hit the target. Together with the servant, they went to look at the booty, which turned out to be quite large. This wolf was the largest in the pack, and Igor had long been monitoring the movements of the animals in order to catch the wolf. The servant was surprised how the king managed it, but he replied that since he had made his way into the depths of the forest, he could not do otherwise. However, the servants realized that they had come here not only for the wolf. The forest was called black because of the tall trees that did not allow light to pass through at all. This is the northern forest of Arendelle. If you cross the river that flows through it, you can get to the Toulouse Empire. This forest is a secret passage for spies and robbers. The king said that secret negotiations were underway with his mother, and perhaps something secret was being sent to this region. The servant agreed that if this was true, then the Queen Dowager was behind it. But its purpose remained unknown. After Rihanna became pregnant, the Allison family became quiet, and this is probably the calm before the storm. Both wanted to know what Hertia was up to. The king suggested that they hurry before it was completely dark, and it would take a lot of strength to move the wolf's carcass. He told his servant that he wanted to be bait. This alarmed the servant, but Igor was determined. All men wanted to be in his place. He mounted his horse and decided that everyone should know what it was like to be a king. Find out that what seems sweet is actually poison. It was rumored that the Earls of Clovis and Allison had a secret meeting and were discussing something. The king decided to use Letitia to find out this, and he ordered the servant to carry the wolf himself. This seemed like a difficult task for Basil, but it was punishment for reporting so late to the Earl's meeting. The king began to walk away, and the servant tried to catch up with him. Basil could not understand how Igor dared to bring the queen's sister to the palace and deal with her there. The servant asked the help of other servants to carry the loot. The king refused to help and ordered to return to the palace. There was an outbreak of epidemic in the capital of Arendelle. She reached the royal family at Crichton. Many died, including the crown prince. Rumors about this quickly spread throughout the city. All members of the royal family who attended the funeral at the temple also died from an unknown disease. Not only the crown prince died, but also those in line to the throne. Igor and his servant were in the royal conference room. They were discussing the tragedy that had occurred in Crichton. There are blood relatives of the Dowager Queen there. We need to send a delegation there as soon as possible to express our condolences. Relatives wanted Igor to come to the palace where the epidemic was raging. It's a pity that the neighboring country went through this, but it was impossible to thoughtlessly send people to the center of the epidemic. This request was very strange for Igor. The guy could not understand why his relatives insisted on his arrival. After all, he could bring the disease to his city. If the Queen Dowager was involved, the only people who would be in trouble would be those who were close to her. The guy couldn't figure out if all the members of the Crichton royal family were really dead. After all, then it turns out that the only heir will be the Dowager Queen. Hertia really wanted her son to take power. She didn't know what to do. The queen felt very sorry for her cousins. She was very worried about their deaths. Nobody could console her. The woman cried like a child. Even her son could not calm her down. How can she not worry? Such horror is happening in her homeland. Innocent souls died. The son tried to help his mother come to her senses, but the queen lost consciousness. The servants went to fetch the royal physician. The queen's heart was weighed down by a difficult time. What does all of this mean? Igor could not understand what to do. The queen was carried to her room. Over time, she came to her senses. Her first words said that it was Herdia who arranged everything. Basil came with white roses to visit the ruler, but now he has found out the truth. All that remained was to find out in more detail. Is this related to what the king is trying to scout? At that moment, a carriage with an unknown guest drove up to the room. The guest's face was covered with a black robe. The unknown person knocked on the room and it was opened. It seems that this guest was expected. It was Letitia. She came to the king. It was he who called the girl. Letitia really hoped that Igor would make her his queen. She did not allow even a shadow of doubt in her thoughts. She put her hand on the guy's neck and began to kiss him tenderly. 2 months have passed since the outbreak of the plague. An emergency meeting was called for Cretan's council. After the coronation of Dmitri Privius, the kingdom regained stability. He became king and the decree was signed. Igor understood that compared to his father, Privius seemed a weak man, but his diplomatic work was highly appreciated, especially in Arundel. That's actually good. Igor's relative became king, so the hero will have additional diplomatic support. The young and single ruler would probably soon have a wife and children, Bailey suggested. However, Igor did not want to hear anything about his relative. The guy asked the servant not to talk nonsense, but to work better. For example, sort out papers. Bailey's was surprised by this remark, since he had recently finished working with papers. The king decided to visit the queen. The servant supported him in this, but suggested that he should not go on a visit empty-handed. Rihanna was waiting for her husband. Sitting in the room and holding a book, she looked out the window. Then the king came in. The girl was glad to see him. The hero thought that he had distracted his wife from reading, but she did not read the book. She was looking in the book for the feather of a magic bird that had once been placed. Showing it to her husband, the heroine asked if he remembered what it was. Of course, the guy remembered this. The feather appeared during their first meeting. Feather of Atraxia. The king asked what wish Rihanna made, but she replied that she did not wish for anything, since at that moment the miracle had already happened. The guy suggested that in this case, the opportunity to make a wish would go to their child. The girl was surprised by this proposal. At this moment, letters of congratulations and gifts from the royal family of Crichton arrived. These were beautiful jewelry, hats and clothes made from the best materials, and of course toys for the future baby. The jewelry was from the rarest treasures of the northern islands, and animals and fresh fruits from the southern islands. No one thought that the gifts would be bad, since Crichton is a sea power. These gifts could fill the entire palace. There were so many of them. The girl was very happy to receive such attention from her brother. However, the king was embarrassed by this. He was angry with the servant who brought the gifts. A special gift was prepared for the queen. They asked him to open it without witnesses. Then the girl would immediately understand everything. The request to open without witnesses was repeated several times. Rihanna began unpacking her gifts with a smile. She was incredibly pleased, and the servant called her husband into the office. He broke the news that Earl Clovis had died. This could mean that after Crichton, epidemics would begin in their country. The king and his servant tried to talk about this more quietly so that the pregnant queen would not hear. Bailey's tried to calm the guy down, saying that it was too early to talk about this. No one around the count had symptoms of the disease. Lady Letitia was with him before his death. She's fine now. The king was surprised why the girl was with the count. The servant said that according to his information, they could have a secret meeting. Very entertaining. The Queen Dowager tried to set up the Queen's sister with a guy, but when this did not work out, Herdia created dirty rumors. The king couldn't believe it. The servant suggested that if the Earl of Clovis became king, Letitia could be queen. The guy again reprimanded Belize, since what he heard was unpleasant to him. Therefore, talk about this outside the palace must be covered with another rumor. If this suddenly becomes true, it will be a real nightmare. The king had just reached his office, but when he opened the door, he stopped abruptly. It turns out that the same Letitia was standing in the office. The guy realized that he was right. He guessed that the Dowager Queen had ordered a personal package to be given to her. a parcel containing poison created in the Toulouse Empire. One drop is enough to make a person vomit blood. He will die in an instant. If added to wine or other drink, the poison will not be noticeable. It has neither color nor smell. It slowly penetrates the body and then kills the person as if the person had died from a contagious disease. It was she who added poison to the Count's wine. Because of this, he died. The girl was told to use poison when the time came to find her place in life. The king looked at Lutetia and she approached him, smiling. The girl hugged the guy, saying that she was glad to meet him again. Igor was very upset about what happened. He felt like he was covered in mud. The king could not believe that he would have to carry out his plan to get rid of his mother. At this time, Rihanna, being alone in the room, decided to open a gift from her brother. He told her to do it in private. The girl was very interested in what was inside, and so she opened the box. There was a sailboat inside. Rihanna immediately remembered him. When Dmitri was 9 years old, he played with this sailboat. And the girl then didn't even know what the word sailboat meant. After all, she was only 7. The brother explained that a sailboat is a ship that can easily cross any sea. He dreamed of one day going on a sailboat trip and traveling around the world. The girl promised to be there when her brother fulfilled this dream. However, first they needed to grow up. The girl also remembered how they played with him. These were very warm and pleasant memories. They both grew up and his brother finally fulfilled his dream. But the girl is not there yet. However, she had Atraxia's feather. Rihanna remembered how at a banquet her husband said that the kingdom needed to develop sea trade routes. Looking at the sailboat that fulfilled Dima's dream, she began to think, if only her husband had a sailboat like his, then his dream would also come true. At this time, Igor, being in the office with Lutetia, ordered her not to let anyone into the room except a few guards. Baileys obediently went to carry out his master's orders. Then the guy looked at Lutetia. They needed to discuss something. Igor told Lutetia that she had committed an outrageous act. She spread rumors that she would become his wife. In addition, the girl lied that they slept together several times. But this never happened. Did she really want to become queen that much? The king tied her hands to prevent her from running away. He asked the girl who incited her to do this. The king did not want to act rudely, but it was better to do so than to torture her. The guy ordered to answer his questions. At that moment, Bayless entered the room. Igor showed him the exit. He left and locked the door. The servant also realized that it was necessary to contact the captain of the guard. After all, the culprit of the event has been found. It was Lady Lutetia. The Queen Dowager was currently enjoying tea in her room. A maid came to her and reported that a red-haired girl was now in the king's office. Well, promises are promises. Although Hertia felt sorry for her son, she could not help but reward the girl for her service. The maid asked why the queen asked to deal with the count. It turns out that the queen's father lost a large sum of money to Count Clovis a long time ago. Hertia had no other choice. But isn't it dangerous to associate such a girl with His Majesty? Of course. But it was this girl who saved the queen from her worst enemy. That's why Letizia is much better than sweet Rihanna. And the queen understood that the girl was motivated to help. At this moment, Igor tried to find out everything from the guest, but she stubbornly did not answer his questions. The heroine laughed back at him. He pushed the girl away from him. The king could not understand who she took him for and why she was behaving this way. He looked sternly into the eyes of the red-haired beauty, seeing that tears appeared on her face. Igor decided to repeat the question again and asked for an honest answer. Who is he to her? The girl replied that he was her king. Only her. The hero understood what a terrible person was in front of him. But the time had come to find out the truth. And the girl decided that she would tell everything now. She will tell you why she tried to kill Count Clovis. More precisely, she didn't try, but did it. The king began to listen to her carefully, sitting down closer. The girl began to flirt with him and stroke his neck. She said she did it for the opportunity to be queen. Igor was very surprised by the story. The girl reminded that the king loves her. And in this case, there is no point in being together with Rihanna. The guy couldn't understand what this crazy girl was talking about. At that moment, the sound of a door opening was heard. The king once again ordered Basil not to let anyone in. However, in response, I heard the sound of a falling toy. This sailboat was held by Rihanna as she opened the door. She was very outraged by what she saw. After all, at that moment, the king and her sister were in close embrace. The guy turned to look at the newcomer. He was very surprised that it was his wife. Rihanna's eyes became very sad. She looked at them and did not understand what was happening. The girl felt pain from betrayal. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't say a word. Her sister entered the conversation. She suggested that Rihanna came in to disturb her and the king. But the queen did not expect to hear anything good from her sister. The king shouted at the red-haired girl, trying to silence her. Rihanna ran down the corridor. The husband tried to catch up with her. However, Letitia tried in every possible way to prevent this. She held his hand and did not let him leave. The king could barely escape. The girl looked after the running guy. After that, she was left alone in the office, and the king tried to clear up this misunderstanding as quickly as possible. After all, everything was just getting better in the family. Running down the corridor, Rihanna could not understand how this could even happen, why they did this to her and why she was running away, why he was with Letitia. The heroine could not find answers to these questions. In her head, all thoughts were mixed into one word: why? The girl remembered that she had already seen such betrayal in her life, when her mother cried and asked the count not to leave her. After that, the girl saw her mother only at the funeral. Then she could communicate with her only at the grave. She also remembered that she had to meet her younger sister. The red-haired spoiled girl often offended her. This made Rihanna cry. She could cry for days. She was hurt by both the presence of this child and her actions. As a child, the girl was often scolded for quarrels with her sister. The heroine was forced to be more lenient because she is the older sister, so she must give in. Next, Rihanna remembered the betrayal of the queen. Hershia insisted that the girl become the new queen of Arendelle. She even promised to be like a mother to Rihanna. Igor wanted to warn the girl about this when he told her to think about whether she wanted to be a queen. This was just before their marriage. However, everything was decided. The girl had no choice. No one asked what she wanted and what she didn't. She didn't want this from the very beginning. The girl stood and recalled these incidents. She stood and looked out the window, illuminated by the light. Her husband caught up with her, although he had to run for a long time. Tears streamed down Rihanna's cheeks. She didn't know what was heavier, her body or her heart. She no longer felt responsible for the decision. Once Rihanna reached the light, life gave up the pressure. Yes, maybe she didn't want to fight anymore. The bright rays of the sun shone directly into the girl's eyes. Only when she stopped did Rihanna realize how dark her life was and made a decision. She doesn't want to run away anymore. At that moment, Igor was already not far from her, and the heroine fell unconscious. We are transported to a time when the girl is 12 years old again and looks like a child, and so she promised her nanny to go with her to Crichton. This conversation took place in the living room of the Allison estate. At that moment, the mistress's gaze was no longer at all similar to the child's gaze. She thought and spoke like an adult. Jeffrey wondered why the lady had so suddenly decided to leave for Crichton. Yes, it really was an unexpected decision. However, the girl hoped that everyone would understand her. Jeffrey guessed that she would want to do this, because it was the best solution. There are relatives in Crichton who could protect her. The girl was glad that her decision was understood. She also thanked the servant for helping her fight back against her father. However, Jeffrey said he couldn't have done anything differently. But the count was most to blame for what happened. The girl wanted a servant to take care of this house. Sitting in the living room, she decided to give him instructions on what to do next. The girl wanted to transfer all powers to Jeffrey and asked that reports be sent to her once a month. This adult behavior surprised the servant very much, but the young countess could not leave the estate to her father. And this is quite logical. Jeffrey had to agree to these terms to take care of the house. After all, the owner of the estate is not worthy of this. Everyone in the house knew that this servant was very capable. Even Mary confirmed this. The man was pleased to hear praise addressed to him. Next, Rihanna and Mary began to get ready for the trip. Since this was an unexpected decision, we had to act quickly. The girls hurriedly packed their suitcases and took the necessary things. Using memories of her past life, Rihanna left instructions to the butler Jeffrey on how to manage the estate and other property. She wrote it down on paper and left the sheet on the table. The estate's lands were barren and rocky, and the trade route was far away. Therefore, Jeffrey suggested not to count on him, thinking that it would be better this way. The girl understood what he was talking about, but she had ideas that she described on the sheet. The servant obediently obeyed her. Even before Rihanna's rebirth, a deposit of the Arc gemstone was discovered on lands owned by Count Allison. These stones can hold a large amount of light, Such a valuable mineral was used in various fields. Thanks to the money brought in by the Arkstone trade, the incompetent Count Allison was able to move into the center of the political arena. This allowed him to oppose the regency of the living queen. They nevertheless decided to leave these lands just in case, although this decision was not easy. The nanny looked at the girl and realized that she had to grow up very quickly to make such decisions. And now they are on their way to the ship. The girl looked curiously out the carriage window, watching what was happening around her. The lady would certainly be happy with the trip. The carriage approached the port. The nanny helped the girl down, since it was dangerous for the child to do this on her own. The port was very large and beautiful in the girl's eyes. The bell rang, inviting them to board the ship that was sailing to Crichton. Passengers began to check in. To do this, you had to show your ticket. Of course, Rihanna and Mary had their own tickets too. Port workers recognized Rihanna Allison. She's the Count's daughter. The girl confirmed that they were not mistaken. They were waiting for her on the ship, and now, finally, she is here. The captain was called in honor of this. His invitation surprised Rihanna and the nanny a little. The captain came up. Everyone had been waiting for the girl's arrival since they learned that she would be sailing on this ship. Meeting her was very pleasant for the ship's workers. Aristocrats usually rent an entire ship. The workers were surprised when they heard that the girl would sail with the rest of the passengers. However, Rihanna just wanted to get to Crichton faster. The captain praised the girl for her excellent choice. After all, this ship is the fastest and safest among all passenger ships in the country. The captain decided to give them a tour of the ship. Only now did the girl realize that she was leaving, but she was glad for the future excursion. This trip is needed in order to choose a better future for yourself. The young countess was offered the best cabin, and the most luxurious one on the entire ship. If necessary, the captain offered to contact him for help. Then he left. The girl and the nanny looked at their room with delight. She was extremely beautiful. There were many flowers around. There was no end to the girl's admiration. After all, this is a real hotel on the open sea. It is so romantic. Marie was much more happy than Rihanna. After all, the nanny had never sailed on such large ships before. The woman suggested going up on deck, and the girl readily agreed. There was such a mesmerizing view there. Seagulls flew over the sea. The sun's rays warmed everyone present. The sea sparkled and shimmered with the reflection of the sun's rays. The pleasant sound of the waves created an incredible melody. The wind blew straight into people's faces. Therefore, the girls had to hold on to their hats. They stood at the very bow of the ship and enjoyed the most beautiful view. Suddenly, Rihanna saw a familiar figure on the bow of the ship. Apparently, the ship's workers wanted to show it to everyone, since they placed it in such a prominent place. These figures were the same on all ships. Next, the girls drew attention to the wings of this statue. People apparently often touched some decorative elements. Because of this, they became smooth and shiny. There was a belief that if you touch these elements, the journey will be safe. Therefore, Rihanna also decided to touch the wings of the statue. However, she could not reach them. Mary had to help the child with this. Together, the girls were able to reach and touch the wings. People around watched this. The nanny and the girl began to discuss who was depicted on the statue. It could have been a mermaid, but a mermaid must have a tail. Then it could be an angel since he has wings. The ship's workers were amused by this reasoning. After all, on the ship there was a statue of the Artaxia bird, which protects the ship. The ship worker told the girls about this. This surprised them very much. After all, the statue doesn't look like a bird at all. Indeed, there were few similarities. However, the ship itself is called Artaxia. Don't passengers know about this? It turned out that if you touch the wings of the statue, the ship will return safely to Arendelle. What to do? After all, the girls are not going to come back. The ship worker said that in the future the girls will test this for themselves. Ships with the Artaxia figure are very durable. Rihanna was surprised by what she now found out. Will she really have to change her plans now? The girl stood and thought about what to do next. At that moment, she asked the nanny to bring her a shawl from the cabin because she felt cold. The nanny willingly obeyed the command, and the girl was left alone on the deck. At that moment, she took out a bird feather that she had hidden in her sleeve. She took the pen in her hands and thought why she needed such a strong connection with Artaxia. Why if she died so stupidly? Therefore, the girl decided to throw the feather into the sea. She followed the falling feather with her gaze until it touched the water. Then the girl watched as it sank, leaving behind a small flash of light. But it seems that the feathers don't sink. There's clearly something wrong with him. At that moment, the nanny came up with a shawl. The woman covered the girl and asked how cold she was. The girl had red eyes due to the wind. The nanny suggested that she go down to the cabin so as not to get sick. Getting sick is always bad. When they decided to leave, many people were watching the sea and beyond. But it turned out that people were watching not the sea, but the late man. Because of this, the ship had to stop. The girls did not have time to reach the cabin when they heard a noise. They couldn't understand what had happened. Someone made a fuss because he wasn't allowed on the ship. Like this. This man was just a little late, so he couldn't board the ship. The latecomer ordered the ship to be stopped so that he could enter it. But passengers were very outraged by this. You need to arrive on time. But you can't do that. People even wanted to call the guards. But the captain ordered the ship to be immediately returned to port. Where does the latecomer have so much courage? Who was he? Near the ship next to the servant, Igor stood. All passengers on the ship had to get off. Many were upset about the failed trip. But someone realized that this was the action of a magic pen. It helped Igor, who was rushing towards the ship with all speed, to stop it, in time. He didn't want Rihanna to leave. 6 years pass. The action takes place in the capital of Arendelle-Edern. Spies were executed in demonstrations on the streets of the city. And now one of these is happening. The authorities must punish the spy from Crichton. The people were very surprised how a spy could be among them. Few could believe it, but this man came from Crichton and tried to poison the royal family. By decree of the king, he was sentenced to hanging. The order was written on a sheet of paper with a seal, and was in the hands of the executioner. And since this is an order, it must be executed. People in the crowd shouted unflattering words at the spy. People were afraid that harm would come to the royal family. Therefore, everyone was waiting for the execution to be carried out. The queen found out about this. She wondered if it was her son who ordered the execution of a man from the Crichton nobility, and how he decided to start a war with his allies. These thoughts haunted Herdia. But the king was already an adult and capable of making serious decisions. War is war. What can you do? After all, his mother expected adult decisions from him. But she clearly did not give such instructions. The guy asked Baileys to come over. The servant approached the king, holding a book of notes in his hands. The queen was very surprised to see this book in the hands of the servant. He didn't know if the queen would resist, as if she didn't know anything. After all, her son actually executed a spy. He was supposed to go to Crichton by order of the queen. All to poison the royal family. After all, Herdia still had poison left. It was hidden in a secret safe. He did not know how the young king could know about this. After all, the mother does everything for the well-being of her son. Igor stopped his mother from further words because he did not want to listen to her cowardly excuses. This proved that the queen turned a blind eye to the aristocrats' tax evasion. The kingdom received bribes and used them to spend on military needs. It was not clear why the king did not know about military expenses. Hertzia tried to explain that her son allegedly misunderstood everything. However, her behavior suggested that the queen was simply trying to protect herself. Since her son is already on the throne, did she have any reason to take bribes? The king decreed that from that moment on, all the power and finances of the queen dowager would pass to him, the king of Arendelle. Igor ordered the dowager queen to be imprisoned in the northern palace. This is done so that she cannot contact other aristocrats and influence politics. Igor, king of Arendelle, was 17 years old when he removed the dowager queen from power and created his own government. After some time, a ship from Crichton appeared in the waters of Arendelle. This meant the start of the war. Next, we are transported to the estate of Dmitri Privius. He had a meal with his sister. Recently, they played golf with other servants. Dmitri praised his sister for allegedly playing better than anyone in his opinion. However, the girl thought that he was laughing at her. Therefore, she suggested leaving conversations and eating in silence. The brother decided to support his sister, saying that because of this sport she would soon become healthier, and he can even catch a bear. Jokingly, he invited her to join him on a bear hunt. However, the girl was forced to refuse because she did not want to look at the blood. Dima remembered the incident when, as a child, his sister lost consciousness when she saw a dead bear. This was her first hunt in her life. Many were scared when the girl lost consciousness, but later it turned out that she had a fear of blood. When she saw how the bear was being carried, she thought that it was alive and made its way into the house. but now she is healthier. The girl promised not to faint so as not to bother others, and it was good that her health had improved. However, it was important to remain cautious. The girl was very ill when she arrived from Arendelle, but that was 6 years ago. She was only 12 years old then. Dima said that his sister is still a baby for him. After all, they spent time together since childhood. We played together, had lunch together, and Dimitri's father, Rihanna's uncle, still took care of them. The meal was coming to an end. Father asked Dimitri if he was thinking about war with Arendelle. This question made the guy think, is it worth it or not? After all, they could very well win. But it cannot be denied that the enemy also has a chance to win. However, Dimitri's father did not think so. A war broke out between the two countries, which did not exist in Rihanna's past life. If Arendelle's offensive is not repelled, then irreparable things may happen. And what exactly the girl did not know. The king of Arendelle had been effectively developing shipping for several years. Lexington alone supplied vast supplies of wood and other materials for shipbuilding. The strength of the fleet turns out to be not so important, but they have no experience of battles on the waters of Arendelle. If the king prepares carefully, he will win. Both sides had previously formed an alliance to work together against Toulouse's threats, but it turned out that Crichton was trying to influence the internal affairs of Arendelle. As a result, an aristocrat from Crichton who was a spy was executed, and this led to the outbreak of war between the two countries. Apparently, in this life, Igor managed to strengthen his power. He dreamed of creating a strong Arendelle fleet and of the country becoming a maritime power. The girl was surprised why she was still thinking about Igor's well-being. No, she shouldn't have thought about him. Nobody needs this now. It was strange how such a thought could even appear in her head. Dima noticed that something was wrong with Rihanna. He thought she had a headache. Apparently, she overdid it today while playing with the maids. She was also feeling a little sleepy. She was probably very tired, so he suggested that she go and rest. Rihanna said she was fine and asked not to worry about her. You just need to rest a little and everything will work out. The girl wished everyone good night. Uncle understood what she was worried about. She had never been so affectionate towards him, but apparently something had changed. This means that at that moment she was thinking about someone else. But about whom? The girl slowly walked to her room. Her thoughts did not give her peace. As she walked along the dark corridor, she imagined that her husband was also walking alone. She forbade herself to think about him, but because of this, the memories became even stronger. She imagined his steps along the corridor, how he could go to his room. At least that's how it used to be. No, don't think about him, why do you need this? She told herself. However, the thoughts still went on and on. The girl recalled her wedding. I remembered the appearance of the king, his kisses. But there was no point in dwelling on the past. He's gone. Rihanna recalled that she could have had a child before, but she forbade herself to even miss anyone from her past life. After all, she herself chose this new path. Suddenly she heard someone calling her from behind. She could not know whose voice it could be. Dimitri, Igor, or her sister. An hour earlier, a delegation with Princess Helena Crichton arrived at the estate. All the servants greeted her. Rihanna and her brother were also at the meeting. The beauty of the princess was the same as before. She was like a light in this chaos of war. However, Duke Rurik paid too many compliments to Helena, which is why she reprimanded him. She said that it is not beauty that shines, but the hearts of those who bravely fight for the country. Rihanna was worried that the person standing next to her, who has less than half of her relatives from Crichton, would take a place in her brother's heart, even though he loves his country very much. Helena was surprised that Duke Rurik was so worried about her. She suggested showing the power of his care through play. This made Rihanna very worried. Those present decided, at Helena's invitation, to start the game. The princess threw the ball to the Duke. He was glad to support her in the game, because he thought that the princess had come especially to him. At that moment, the ball hit the Duke directly in the face. Rihanna was scared by what happened. She would like to stop the princess, but did not know how to do it. After all, it was clear that the princess liked to mock others. However, why is she doing this to the Duke? Now he will have a bruise on his face. Those present began to try to stop the princess and called the governess. Helena was surprised why her behavior caused such displeasure, but she started it herself. The governess, when she arrived, was surprised why no one had helped the gentleman before. She called Helena to follow her, and Rihanna. After helping the Duke, the governess went into the house with the girls. The aristocrats were delighted with the girl of mixed nationality. She understood that the guest would cause problems of her own. The girls entered Helena's chamber. She could have rested since she was off the road, but the governess decided to give instructions to the girls. They lasted about 2 hours. When she finished speaking, Rihanna was happy. The girl understood that if the situation had been more serious, the conversation would have continued further. It turned out that Helena started this game to take revenge on Rurik, so there was no need to ask her to stop. In addition, Helena was embarrassed by the mixed nationality of her interlocutor, but they don't choose relatives. However, Rihanna was not upset by this. Despite what others said, she could still sense her blood from Cretan. Helena believed that the girl hated Arundel more than anyone, and then the young countess thought that it was in vain that she had not paid attention to the Duke's words. Everything will stop when the war ends. To date, not a single naval battle has been lost. So next time they would win too. Helena Crichton was the third princess of the Crichton family. She was an incredible beauty. Her long blonde locks attracted the gaze of passers-by, and the girl's green eyes did not leave anyone indifferent. The youngest princess was adored by the entire royal family. She was never deprived of the attention and love of those around her. As a child, many young aristocrats wanted to become her friends. But in the end, they began to avoid the girl because of her excessive demands. Throughout her childhood, she said that she did not want to communicate with stupid girls. Few people could get along with her. Therefore, she had few real friends in childhood. Rihanna was an aristocrat and the same age as the princess, so she became her only friend. As a child, Rihanna called Helena a shiny chicken. The heroine was taller than Helena, and she also had a beautiful face. Her friend often tested her, for example, by forcing her to comb her hair. The spoiled girl said that if she wants to become her friend, she should be able to do it. She made her comb her hair in front of her to see how good she was. After 3 minutes, the child got tired of this and switched to something else, for example, asking him to bring her cocoa. The appearance of a friend in the form of a princess helped Rihanna a lot. She felt lonely at that time after escaping from Arundel. Therefore, she tolerated all the antics of her new friend. This time, Helena's whim was to go home with Rihanna. I had to harness the carriage. Helena wanted her friend to just stay with her in the palace. She couldn't understand why the girl would go back every time. Is there really something hidden at home? And Rihanna was simply tired of palace life. Also, she was not given the idea that the future war was very strange. Igor used to be hot-tempered, but not that much. Maybe he is like this because now she is not around. And the ship sailed closer and closer to the enemy's port. The situation became more tense. Did both sides really want to take part in the battle? What's wrong with a king wanting to protect his country? The problem was that it was quite dangerous to stay in the port. But the king suggested not to make a mountain out of a mountain. This surprised Baileys because the problem was really big. The enemy fleet was approaching them. He was already quite close, and the king did not seem to react at all. This is the front, and staying here is dangerous. However, Igor said that he now needs to be in exactly this place. The enemy ships simply wanted to scare them, the young king thought. Fortunately, Crichton's ships arrived here first. When the time comes, the king will be able to welcome them with warm hugs. The servant was increasingly surprised by the words he heard. Now the guy gave the command to raise the sails. Baileys was surprised. Was Igor really ready for this? The army moved forward. All is ready. Open fire on Crichton's ships. A difficult battle began. One after another, the enemy ships were defeated. The ships caught fire with each new shot. Many people wondered if this was actually happening. Dimitri's father learned about this from his servant. This news was brought by a person who was at the scene of the incident. The count understood that he should have responded to this even when the king kicked out his mother. Now it was necessary to inform higher circles about the emergency situation. The hero sat in his office and thought about what to do next. We decided to immediately convene a council. Rihanna was at the previous estate at the time. She just arrived recently. The faithful nanny warmly greeted her mistress. She had already begun to worry about the girl's long absence. She decided to ask what happened in the palace, and the girl began to find words to describe what happened. Mary realized that Helena was playing a strange game again. What is she thinking about when she does this? Rihanna was not angry with her friend, as she saw it as taking care of herself. However, Helena has pulled similar pranks before. Often the reason was that someone did not want to marry her. And because of the girl, Rumors began to circulate that Rihanna is really very picky. Because of the war, it became more difficult to find a suitable groom. But the girl no longer thought about marriage. Time passed, and it was much easier for her to remember what she experienced. The nanny thought that the girl did not want to get married because of her father, but she doubted whether she was right. After all, 5 years after her departure to Crichton, Jerry reported Allison's death. He sent a letter to the girl. "Mistress Rihanna, how are you? I'm sorry to tell you sad news. Lady Letitia discovered the Earl dead in his chambers. A vial of poison was found next to him. It is assumed that he committed suicide." Rihanna remembers suicide. In his previous life, he died in the same way. She wondered if his death might have had something to do with Letitia, but she thought that she shouldn't think about it. "I had to get it out of my head." Now everything was different. There were rumors that the former count decided to take such a step because he could not pay his debts. Those debts came from gambling. The father lost his title and was unable to open mines with the precious metal. He had no other income other than a meager pension. It was surprising that people still did not change. The girl decided that it was better not to deprive him of his family name. Therefore, as the late wife of the deceased count requested, he was buried next to her. Lady Letitia did not agree on this point, but she yielded, receiving a certain amount as consolation. However, the problem was that Lady Letitia had since disappeared. This is all that the servant reported in the letter. He once again offered his condolences, said that the funeral went well, and he hopes that the girl will not worry about this in the future. There was a signature at the end, and then the father died. Letitia disappeared. What brought suffering to the girl and killed her is no longer there. She felt peace in her soul. Rihanna hoped that the events from her past life would not repeat, but no one knew where Letitia was. The father influenced the girl's thoughts about marriage, but this is far from the main reason. Therefore, the young countess asked the nanny not to worry. It's not because of her father. She doesn't think about marriage. He just doesn't want to make marriage the goal of his life. She felt bad as a child, but now she has an uncle in Dima. And the girl was also very glad to have such a good and caring nanny. Therefore, there is nothing to worry about. At that moment, her brother came into the room. He again addressed her with the word baby and called her to dinner in the dining room. However, Rihanna has previously asked not to call her baby. She no longer liked this word. They went to the table together. On the way, Dmitri said that he had already heard about the antics of the arriving princess. He joked, calling Rihanna her accomplice. Then the guy again made fun of his sister, offering to go hunting or fishing. When they approached the dining room and opened the door, they saw a commotion in the room. There were a lot of people in the dining room discussing something. Anxious thoughts settled in the girl's head, but they still decided to clarify what was happening. Dimitri's father responded to this. Yes, what everyone feared happened. Crichton lost to Arundel. What she heard struck fear into the girl's thoughts. Did this really happen? She couldn't believe it. The girl couldn't understand how Crichton could lose. What did the future hold now? The trial took place in the Palace of Parliament. Many people gathered in the hall. We lost to Arundel. What could the ruler say in his defense, and who commanded the fleet? However, if they had not fallen for Arundel's provocation, this would not have happened. Who will now take responsibility for what happened? And is it necessary to think about it now? The Crown Prince of Crichton entered the hall. His name was Eden Roscoe Crichton. He tried to calm those who made noise in the hall. After the loud word, everyone fell silent. The prince ordered to think about retaliatory measures and not talk about responsibility. From now on, anyone who talks irrelevantly will say goodbye to his tongue. Eden gave this order. He realized the futility of starting a meeting. Daniil, the secretary, was ordered to read a report on the current situation. He reported that the naval outfit involved 156 ships and 8,000 soldiers. About 10 ships were destroyed by the enemy. 100 soldiers were wounded or killed. This figure was quite small compared to the entire army of the country. In principle, it's good that they lost with such small losses. After all, this damage can be quickly repaired. However, a minute later, it was said that while returning to port for repairs, the ships were caught in a storm and the entire fleet was lost. Arundel's ships are now approaching Crichton. When those present heard this, many were overcome with fear. What will happen to the country now? What to do if there is no army? What is the king of Arundel even thinking about? How dare he allow such a situation to happen? Meanwhile, Igor was on a ship in Seviot Harbor in Crichton. His faithful servant was with him. The young king wanted to swim there as quickly as possible. He hasn't seen a problem with this yet. Very little time has passed since the naval battle. How is the king going to attack the mainland? After all, their army now also needs reorganization. The servant suggested that now it was impossible to go into battle again. However, the king said that their losses allowed this. Baylis was worried that this outrage would cause his wife to divorce him before the ink was dry on his prenuptial agreement. After all, this is the time when the servant was planning his honeymoon. His beautiful wife wrote many insults in letters during these 2 months of war. Because of his absence from home, the servant was worried that if his wife filed for divorce, then who would take responsibility? The king said that he would take care of this situation. For example, he will assign Bailey's wife a pension for her deceased husband, even before she signs the divorce papers. This proposal alarmed the servant even more. Or was it just a joke? The king continued to laugh at the servant and asked who he wanted to become food for, a whale or a shark. The servant decided to stop joking and agreed to go with him to the capital as the king wanted. Igor understood that he had a disobedient assistant. However, the interlocutor objected that this was the whining of a subject who had a very stubborn king. They both laughed at this joke. The king further clarified whether the servant had conveyed their demands to Crichton. Of course he handed them over. He made the demands as soon as the opportunity presented itself, so now there is most likely a commotion there. The servant decided to clarify whether the king was really going to do what was written in the letter. Otherwise, why would they send this? Maybe there was no need to start this war. However, no one remembered her reasons. At this time, at the estate of Princess Privius, Rihanna and her friend were wandering around the summer garden. They loved to care for trees and collect their fruits. The girls discussed what was happening together. Rihanna noticed that Helena was worried about something. However, the girl thought that if she was active, it would be easier for her. She was worried about her future. What should they do now? The young countess tried to calm her down. She said everything would be fine. Arundel and Crichton have a common enemy, the Toulouse Empire. The king of Arundel is no fool. If he came to Crichton, he would try to resolve this situation as best he could. Helena was very encouraged by her friend's words. Now she didn't have to worry so much. The king of Arundel came this far because Crichton's ship sailed into the waters of his country. Once this problem is resolved, he will no longer attack Crichton. Even in a past life, Igor wanted to make Arundel a maritime power, and the girl remembered this. Therefore, he will not directly harm Crichton. After all, Igor is not that stupid. At this time, Rihanna saw that her friend's mood had changed again. She decided to find out what the reason was. The girl replied that she had never heard her friend say that Crichton was still a country. She didn't try to blame the girl. After all, she knew that she was not protecting Arundel. It's just that if her homeland is Crichton, then what happens? It seemed to Helena that the girl did not consider herself to belong here. Because of this, she became scared. The girl began to worry that one day her friend would leave her. These thoughts really spoiled her mood. She even started crying. And Rihanna decided to hug her friend to calm her down again. She had never told the princess how she felt before, but the girl really felt that one day she would leave here. 6 years ago to the day she arrived at Crichton, she suffered from poison. Memories of my past life became nightmares that caused pain. Her nanny was very worried about the girl's health and took care of her until she recovered. As Rihanna became an adult, her health improved. But the memories remained as anxiety deep in my heart. She was planning to go to a remote place to overcome her anxiety, to a place where the king of Arundel would never find her. However, she told her friend that she had no plans to leave. She came here a long time ago, leaving the estate in Arundel. The girl decided not to think or talk about it anymore, deciding that it was much better to just take a walk. After all, in the fresh air, bad thoughts quickly disappeared. At that moment, the governess ran up to them. She looked very worried. It was clear that she was scared. The governess was glad to see the girls, as she had been looking for them for a long time. Helena asked her what was the matter. The governess said that Arundel had conveyed his demands. The letter stated that they were asking for a marriage with the princess. This incredibly surprised Rihanna. She was surprised that there would be a royal wedding. And if there is a wedding between Igor and Helena, what will happen to it? It was surprising that when making his own decisions, he still did not choose her. She assumed there was something wrong here, and I doubted whether Igor had ever really loved Rihanna. The majestic courtroom, where every corner was permeated with tension, was filled with crowds of people. Everyone was waiting for a decision. The man stood in front of the audience. His gaze was insistent, as if calling for him to speak. He addressed the crowd, asking questions about the complexity of international marriages, hinting at his uncertainty. Supporting his point of view, the man argued that there was no point in worrying too much about this. The prince, sitting in a high chair, looked down on what was happening. He said that the man had not yet fully realized the situation. The prince, standing in the hall, emotionally expressed his thoughts. He explained that in the past, such marriages took place for the sake of international harmony. However, he argued that in the present situation the princess would only become a hostage. The man replied that that was not the case. The prince recalled the statements of a man who had previously stated the need not to worry about the difficulties of international marriages. However, he drew attention to the prince. He asked him if he considered this proposal unusual. One can only remember King Igor's past refusals to all marriage proposals. The prince, sitting on his throne, pondered the words of the man in the audience and the sudden desire of the king of Arendelle for an international marriage. The thought of why the king was so suddenly asking for an international marriage haunted no one. It was very strange and sudden. Those present in the audience assumed that with this proposal the king wanted to put pressure on them. He can use this to interfere in the internal affairs of the country. After all, the beloved princess from the royal family was abandoned. Sending her as a trophy for winning a battle was simply disgusting. The prince realized that those present were repeating the same thing all the time. It was necessary to find a way to prevent this. Sitting on the throne, the prince looked at the gathered people in the hall. At this time, someone approached the secretary. This man reported that the princess felt ill, and because of this, a break was announced. All were declared free by the judge until the prince returned. There was commotion in the hall. The prince and his servants quickly left the hall and went to his sister to find out how she felt. Dmitri, who was present in the hall, reflected on the current situation. He had never encountered anything like this before. He needed to understand what this could mean for their family and for the whole country. His father approached him and asked where Rihanna was now. At the same time, the prince and his servants had already approached the princess's chambers. He wanted to visit the girl. The princess was sitting on the bed next to her friend when those present entered. The prince said that he heard about his sister's illness and decided to find out how she was feeling. Helena's hands were cold, so she was asked to rest. However, the girl insisted that she was fine, and the malaise was due to strong surprise. Her brother asked her not to worry about Arendelle. He promised never to allow her to marry someone she didn't love or for political reasons. The girl looked at the prince and realized that he would not let her down. After all, despite the losses, Crichton still stood firmly on his feet. The prince decided to find out who dared to disturb the princess with such unconfirmed statements. He said this with an angry look, so that those present were afraid of him. The governess who broke the news began to cry. So someone was found who frightened the princess to such an extent that she lost consciousness. After that, it was hard to call her a servant of the princess. The girl asked her brother not to be angry. She wanted to protect her servants, and she believed that they were not to blame for her such a reaction. Helena admitted her fearfulness. However, despite such a difficult situation, she could not help but worry about her servants. Even when in decline, she remained good-natured and worried about those around her. The prince believed that a loved one should have taken care of her now. Rihanna felt that this was a reproach towards her. However, she agreed with this. In the eyes of the prince, the girl seemed insensitive like a stone. After all, Rihanna had to be raised according to his rules. The prince decided to teach the girl some manners in the future. She realized that the attitude towards her had changed for the worse, but it was the other way around. The more the prince looked at her, the more he wanted to make her his. The only problem was that Rihanna was Helena's friend. The princess decided to stand up for her best friend. She reprimanded her brother, saying that Rihanna was not to blame for anything. Helena couldn't understand why her brother continued to be angry with those around him. However, he managed to avoid the conversation. The prince said that he forgives everyone at the request of the princess, and he promised that there would be no next time for forgiveness. He asked everyone to leave the room. Those present obeyed. Rihanna was the last to leave the room and closed the doors behind her. This day was clearly not going well for her. The girl had a bad feeling. She couldn't understand what was happening or what had already happened. At this moment, several maids approached her. One of them quietly put something into the girl's hand. When the maids left, Rihanna decided to see what it was. She saw a small piece of paper. Out of curiosity, the girl hurried to immediately read what was written in the note. It was a letter from Dima. He invited her to meet right now in the garden behind the princess's palace, and Rihanna accepted his invitation. Arriving at the indicated place, she saw that her brother was already waiting for her. The girl happily went to meet him. She was surprised what her brother was doing here at such a time. After all, a cabinet meeting is now taking place. However, there was no point in a meeting where they could not come to a common decision. That's why Dima ran away from it. The girl began to worry that her uncle would scold her brother for such behavior. There were no problems with this either. Since the guy left this event with the permission of his father, Dima decided to invite his sister on a date. This surprised the girl very much. After all, he was her cousin. How could she go on a date with him? But Dima was persistent. He took his sister's hand and kissed it. More and more questions and uncertainty arose in the girl's head. She couldn't understand how such events could happen in just one day. Dima and Rihanna quickly left the garden, trying to remain unnoticed. The guy held his sister tightly by the hand. She couldn't understand the reason for the rush. However, her brother promised to explain everything to her later. But not now, because they need to act quickly, and it would be even better to run. Dmitri really hoped that his father would do everything right, and that his plan would work. When the meeting ended, Dmitri's father asked where Rihanna was. She was in the princess's palace. Next, the man asked his son to go with him. They went into a secret room near the courtroom. There, his father gave Dima a pass with the royal seal of Crichton. With him, they could go anywhere. This surprised the guy very much, since it can only be used with the permission of the king. The man knew about this, but there was no time to hesitate. Before the meeting, he looked at Arendel's requirements again. To end this war, in addition to paying reparations, they offered to arrange an international marriage. A royal woman of marriageable age was ordered by the crown prince to travel to Arendelle. The man tried to come up with an alternative. Thoughts were confused in his head. Even more questions arose when he saw in the document a mention of women from the royal family of Crichton. He tried to understand how this phrase ended up in the document. After all, Rihanna Privius also belongs to this genus. Dmitri's father asked his assistant who could have seen these documents before him. The assistant thought that this was a document about reparations, and the crown prince saw the document on reparations. These documents were also reviewed by Daniil Rurik. Then Rihanna's uncle realized that the prince was going to send Rihanna to Arendelle without even consulting her family. That would be a pretty mean thing to do. But the decision has already been made. The man explained to his son that he did not want to send Rihanna to Arendelle. After all, she had already suffered there. He felt sorry for his niece. Previously, he did not prevent his sister from marrying a man from Arendelle, and later her life became tragic. The uncle did not want the same life for his niece. Therefore, he asked his son to take Rihanna away. Although the girl's mother herself really wanted marriage with her husband, if she had known how it would all end, her brother would never have let her go there. He couldn't let Rihanna go through what her mother went through. Therefore, we need to take the girl away before the meeting ends. Dima agreed. He agreed to take his sister away so that the prince would not find her. He and his sister drove the horse with all their might. However, the girl began to be confused by the fact that she did not understand where they were going. This road was not like the road to the city. Rihanna wanted to know what was going on and where her brother was taking her. Dima promised to tell her everything as soon as he managed to escape. After all, there is no time now and you need to act quickly. More and more frightening thoughts were in the girl's head, and she asked her brother to stop. At this time, her friend was in her room. She was informed that Rihanna would go to Arendelle instead. This decision was made because this girl is also from a royal family. But the document said nothing about the princess. The fact that Rihanna is not in the direct line of the royal family does not matter. This upset Helena, because she was worried about her friend. The girl believed that Rihanna should not be sent there either. She lost her mother there, and to get rid of the pain, she went to Crichton. In addition, Rihanna is Helena's only friend who has experienced grief, and it would not be fair to send her hostage. The brother was surprised why the girl, even in such a situation, stood up for her friend. After all, then she will have to marry that person herself, and he did not want to allow such a situation. Helena asked to reconsider the decision again and come up with another way out. However, the prince was not ready for this. In his eyes, his sister was naive and too kind-hearted. He hugged her tightly because he was afraid of losing her in the end. The prince reminded his sister that her friend, who had already run away, probably didn't even know how Helena was feeling right now. The girl was surprised that her friend left, because it seemed like a minute ago she was with her. The prince decided to explain the situation to his sister. He said that from now on, Rihanna is not her friend, and not even her maid. And then the Marquis, Dima's father, entered the room. He expressed deep disagreement with the prince's decision. Rihanna, a girl with a deep emotional wound and a kind heart, she won't be able to survive this marriage. And just because she comes from a royal family doesn't mean she shouldn't have a choice. It was then decided to continue the interrupted meeting. Someone present in the hall expressed the idea that since the girl was from Arendelle, she could easily get used to the new life. After this, Marquis Privius was asked what caused his worries in this situation. Some agreed that this was the best solution for Arendelle and Creighton. The lady's appearance is as beautiful as Princess Helena's. And most importantly, the King of Arendelle will certainly be pleased, since his demands will be met. Dimitri's father stood up for Rihanna, even though he had almost no like-minded people. He said that only an outsider can offer to get used to the situation. But Rihanna is not an outsider. And if his own daughter were in the girl's place, the man's carefree attitude would probably disappear. However, that man was not married. It was hard for him to even talk about this topic. The prince decided to find out the opinions of other aristocrats who was on his side and who was not. Marquis Privius was asked to prove his loyalty to Creighton. Those present in the hall supported this decision. Almost everyone agreed to send Rihanna to Arendelle. Let the international marriage be concluded with Rihanna, the niece of the Marquis. But the man hoped that his son and niece were already very far from Creighton. And Helena decided to ask the governess about where Rihanna is now. She had no choice but to confirm that the prince's words were true. The governess had not seen her since the arrival of the crown prince. Surely she could have left the palace. And so Helena sits on her sofa and she is very embarrassed because she did not believe her brother. It's hard for her to look him in the eyes, because the girl feels guilty for protecting her friend. Although it is quite natural to protect your friends. However, Helena did not believe that Rihanna would not have told her about her departure. The governess felt guilty for not stopping Rihanna, but she could have guessed that it was better for the girl not to leave the palace while the prince was here. Helena felt betrayed by her friend. Tears were streaming down her eyes, and Rihanna was already far away at that time. The sudden changes that occurred when Creighton lost to Arendelle influenced Rihanna's desire to live a different life. Fate was against her will. Rihanna felt shackled in her arms and legs. She realized that the more you fight death, the tighter it tries to cling to you. The girl did not know what to do next and what decisions to make. But a lot depends on this now. At that time, they were traveling with their brother. The girl still begged him to stop to talk, and Dima repeated again and again that they had little time. They needed to urgently leave the capital. This surprised the girl very much. She couldn't understand why she needed to leave, and so she got her brother to stop the horse, and they could talk calmly together. They got off the horse. The girl began to listen carefully to her brother. Dima carefully tried to choose words in order to explain the situation in detail and clearly, but at the same time not to frighten his beloved sister. So the girl needs to leave Creighton. And all because she was taken as a hostage to Arendelle instead of the princess. These words caused the girl's incredible surprise. The surprise seemed to have shackled her. Now you need to leave the capital before an official decision is made. The girl began to worry about what would happen to her brother and uncle after she left. However, her brother began to reassure her that there was no need to worry about this now. First, it's worth finishing what you started. After all, her safety depends on it. But Rihanna continued to ask questions about what would happen next with her brother and uncle. After all, the prince will not leave them alone after such an act. The girl could not help but worry about this, as she felt her connection with her family. At this moment, the brother looked at Rihanna with a frightened look. For the first time in her life, she saw Dima so angry. Of course, she is part of the family, and his only younger sister. This plan was created in order to avoid losing a family member. The men understood that this would cause them difficulties, but they had no choice. If they had acted differently, they would have greatly regretted it. Dima assured his sister that nothing bad would happen to them after she left. He hugged her tightly. For the first time since her rebirth, the girl truly cried, but she was relieved that her brother was with her. This consolation drove away all the girl's regrets about her past life. Her brother's hug made her feel loved again. Next, we read about the events of the Arendelle fleet in Creighton's Havana. The king stood on the seashore. As he looked at the starry night sky, Bailey's approached him. At that time, a week had already passed since their arrival in this area. The servant asked what the king was thinking about so late at night. Igor replied that he was just wondering if the time had come to act. Bailey still could not understand whether the king really wanted to use the invented plan. The heroes understood that Crichton was probably furious about reparations and marriage, and they may think that the new plan is a new threat to them. But Igor did not agree with this. He took out a pebble hanging from his neck. It was Ark. The king swung it with all his might and threw it into the sea. He knew what would happen now and decided to make a holiday in honor of his engagement. When the stone reached the water and began to sink, it shone with a bright light. The drops were so light that when they flew up they became fireworks. It was an incredible sight. Hundreds of drops from the sea that flew up became bright lights and fireworks. The king's servant froze in surprise. He had never seen such beauty before. Igor also admired this. Fireworks were visible even in Havana Soviet. People could not understand why the enemy suddenly launched fireworks. And what could that even mean? Some concluded that an international marriage had taken place with Arundel, and this could be a sign of the end of the war. The fireworks came from an incredibly expensive stone. It would later be called the courtship of Arundel. Artaxia gave this chance to the king. Remembering Rihanna, Igor understood that now he would give all his wealth to meet her again. The guy imagined how beautiful the girl must be now. How long and soft her hair is. What lovely eyes. How smooth her skin is. And how beloved and happy she would be next to him now. Next, we are transported to the princess's palace. The prince was furious at what the king had done. He did not understand how Igor could enter their waters and fire fireworks. He also didn't like the fact that the commoners might think it was because of the wedding. The prince was simply furious when he found out about this. He did not want to send his sister to a foreign country. He poured out his anger on the servant who was nearby, and he tried to calm the prince, saying that everything would be sorted out now. The prince ordered Rihanna to be brought to the palace immediately, and if necessary then let the servant do the search himself. For the girl's failure to appear, the servant faced the death penalty. This made the man act much faster. He even ran away from the prince. It turns out that the servant bribed the maid to read that note. But it was unexpected for everyone how quickly Dima acted. To leave the capital, you need a royal family pass. And then the man remembered a conversation with Dimitri's father, when he once asked about the people who had seen the letter from the king. Since the Marquis is the head of diplomats, he could easily get a pass. Therefore, in searching for the girl, they decided to start by talking with her uncle. The servant hoped that he would be able to reason with the Marquis and find out his plan. Next, we are again transported to the place where Dimitri and Rihanna are. The brother began to ask for forgiveness from her, and the girl could not understand what his fault was. It turns out that he simply didn't think about what to do after the escape. The girl joked that her brother used to want to become a pirate, but now he was not ready for it. This situation reminded her of her childhood. She was about 5 years old at the time. Dimitri portrayed a pirate and Rihanna pretended to be a fairy. It was a very fun and carefree time. The children entertained themselves as best they could. For example, as a pirate, Dimitri stood on a stone with a toy ball, so they could play all day long in the garden near the estate. And after the game, they rested under a tree. Sometimes the children fell asleep there. The girl joked that perhaps her brother had decided to become homeless. It seems that childhood was the happiest moment that Arundel could have had. And it's good that the memories remain not only bad ones, but it's still time to go back. They are no longer children to play in the garden. Even the horse they were riding seemed surprised by what they heard. And of course her brother was surprised by these words. He asked his sister to close her eyes. After all, the girl did not have time to notice how blinding bullets made of arkstone were flying towards them. They could not open their eyes so as not to go blind from such a bright light. They seemed to shine even brighter than the sun. The girl decided to ask again about what kind of light it was. Her brother explained that it was a flashbang that could cause them to go blind. So the escapees were found. This flash grenade was launched by the prince's servant. The girl's brother immediately recognized Daniil. The hero began to ask why he was pursuing them. However, the servant suggested not to pretend, since the situation was clear. Dimitri Privius was arrested for disobedience. The army surrounded both the guy and his sister. These two were seriously scared. The following highlights the events in Helen's room. The governess was next to the girl and made sure that everything was okay with her. Suddenly there was a knock in the room. It was Rihanna's favorite cup that fell and broke into pieces. Helena was still waiting for her friend to return. The girl remembered her words when she promised not to leave again. She also remembered that Rihanna had promised to tell her if she left. The princess was very frightened by the words her brother said to her friend. The girl was worried that everything would be fine with Rihanna. At this moment, Parliament made a decision and Rihanna escaped. This means that the prince will be able to take advantage of this and send her as a hostage to Arendelle. Rihanna had a choice: either become a hostage or die for treason. It so happened that the girl served as a bargaining chip in this situation. Helena wanted to warn Rihanna about the danger, but couldn't find the opportunity. Therefore, the princess decided to get ready to go. Since Rihanna has no choice in what to do, Helena had one. The girl decided to exercise her rights. For the sake of her friend who betrayed her, she decided to take extreme measures. Meanwhile, Rihanna and her brother were surrounded by the army. The girl's action was very desperate, but she couldn't change anything. The young countess stood up for her brother and said that she was ready to go back to the crown prince. After all, if her brother is killed, no one will be better off. The girl decided to express what she thought to the prince personally. She decided that this time she would not die alone. She wanted peace and be surrounded by loved ones and their warm words. So an hour before this, the servant finally found the fugitives. They were surrounded by an army. A fight between Dmitri and some armed attackers began. However, the servant stopped them. The order was to capture the fugitives, not to fight them. This should under no circumstances be done to prevent the girl from getting hurt. And it is quite possible that stopping the fight saved Dmitri. After all, there were quite a lot of attackers. But the girl did not stand idle. She was thinking about how to help her brother. Although Dima asked his sister to run away and leave him alone with the attackers, she would never have done that. If she ran away, then both her uncle and brother would be punished for treason. She looked at the horse and saw Dima's dagger. The army thought that the girl wanted to escape. But no. She pulled out a dagger and ordered everyone to stop. She threatened to kill herself if her brother was not left alone. The girl told the army that she had no intention of running away from the very beginning. Now she's not going to be a criminal. Rihanna asked to be taken to the crown prince. She wanted to talk to him in person. In order for the prince to realize his plan, the girl needed to be alive. But the servant decided not to miss the opportunity to get rid of Dmitri. The same one did not even draw his sword while he tried to protect his sister. Now Rihanna claims her innocence and wants to take control of the situation. The servant was forced to agree to her terms and take her to the crown prince. There was no time to waste. The decision was made to go back immediately. The girl was taken to the crown prince and Mr. Privis was taken to the royal dungeon. Despite everything, his brother assured Rihanna that he would be fine. He asked her not to agree to what they wanted to do to her. The army began to take the girl home, where she would have an audience. She was afraid that now she would not see her brother for a long time. They were even transported separately from each other. Arriving at the estate, the girl met her nanny. The young countess was very glad to see Mary. They hugged very tightly when they met. The nanny was saddened that the girl would be sent to Arendelle instead of the princess. However, Rihanna still believed that she could find a way out, so she tried not to worry too much. When she saw the nanny's face, she was no longer as scared as before. The girl was very tired and really wanted to sleep, so the nanny took her to the room. But Rihanna couldn't sleep. She really wanted to get Dima out of prison. And for this, we needed a plan. All that remained was to invent it. The girl remembered the situation when she met her husband. At that moment, Igor said the words that the bird's fate was decided. But she was still able to save the bird. Perhaps this time she will also be able to save her brother. After all, the situation may indeed not be without a way out. And the girl really hoped for it. Just as the branch above the cat broke, the prison lock may break. After some time, Igor talked with his servant. They were on the street. The weather was good. There was no wind for more than a day. The king decided to find out why Baileys did not speak to the servants. But they are always loyal to the king. The heroes decided to set a date for the last day to respond to the kingdom's demands. It was decided to choose tomorrow as the last day. The issue of reparations has already been settled. The only thing left to resolve was the marriage issue. Baileys asked who the king thought would be sent to him as a wife. It could have been a princess or some other girl. But the king himself did not know the answer. This marriage was just an excuse to meet Rihanna. She is a friend of the princess and will not be able to escape this time. Moreover, the prince will probably use it as a bargaining chip, and it will be safer that way. After some time, Rihanna waited for an audience with the crown prince. She was taken to Crichton's palace. Prince Eden was already waiting for the girl. The servants led her deeper into the castle. The girl realized that the audience would most likely be in the prince's chambers. And so it happened. Before entering the chambers, She collected her thoughts. Rihanna clearly understood that she was doing this to save her brother. She went into the prince's room and the door was closed behind her. And now she must tell the reason for her action. The prince began to listen to her carefully, but he couldn't stop thinking about spending the night with the girl. He was very attracted to her. The prince wanted to enjoy her kisses. He had indulged in such fantasies for a long time, but this did not happen. The prince began to say that he had already heard about the girl from Rurik. They figured Rihanna would just run away. But she came back. This means he wants to say something to the prince. However, the girl objected because she did not intend to run away. The fact that her cousin was captured was difficult to interpret differently. Rihanna began to explain that her brother was just worried about her. To prove this to Prince Eden, the girl agreed to go to Arendelle. Her consent surprised the prince, because he was not used to asking anyone. The girl repeated once again that she would go there instead of the princess. She really wanted to save her brother, so she tried to find a common language with the person opposite. It was very strange that these words made him laugh. The whole room was filled with the sound of laughter. The girl became scared. Eden then explained that the council had already made a decision. Therefore, no one needs the girl's consent. She will go there anyway. For the prince, this conversation seemed like a waste of time. At that time, Rihanna had not yet mentioned her brother, who was in prison. Eden walked up to the girl and brushed off her outerwear. He was, of course, very upset to lose to Arendelle. Therefore, the heroine is forced to go as a hostage. Being alone with her and standing so close to the girl, the prince could not help but think what would happen if she became his first. But the girl's menacing gaze did not give any hope for the fulfillment of these expectations. Next, we meet the king in Arendelle. He was in his office, very nicely dressed. From waiting, he did not know what to do. The king walked around the room, then leafed through a book, then sat down and began to think about something. At that moment, a servant entered the office with good news. The answer came from Crichton. The king's elegant appearance surprised the servant very much. He even thought that he was in the wrong room, because he was looking for a person who was more like a commoner. But the person in this room is completely different. The servant's surprise knew no bounds. After all, the prince had not dressed so beautifully for a very long time. However, in order not to offend the prince, Baileys did not say this out loud. The king was ready to listen carefully to the servant, and he decided to inquire about the guy's mood. It turns out that Crichton's envoy has already reported that Count Alison's ward is coming here. She wants to meet the king. Igor was looking forward to this meeting. It is the king's own decision to arrange the meeting. And now, finally, he is waiting for this girl to visit. It seemed that the king had not made independent decisions for a long time. Although no, they used to be like that too. For example, one of them was 6 years ago. Igor and Baileys left the palace on horseback secretly from the empress. They rode for several days without water or food. But they never met the one they wanted to see. As soon as they reached the port, the man sailed to Crichton. And then problems arose. The king's servant was captured. The queen tried for a long time to find out where he went with her son. But the servant was silent. The queen tried to find out at least something about this from the servant. However, she failed. Even despite the fact that after the conversation, Baileys was whipped. Herdia was very frightened by the prince's act. She tried in vain to find out where the Baileys went with her son. The servant's affection for the king had gone too far. The queen explained that if this happens again, then Baileys will be in trouble. She deprived him of 6 months' salary. He was also sentenced to a month in prison. The servant had thoughts in his head that it would be better to confess. But they quickly disappeared when Baileys remembered what the prince looked like at the port. Since childhood, the guy was his mother's puppet. And that day, for the first time in his life, Igor acted of his own free will. When the prince saw Baileys after the punishment, he said that he was glad that he survived. So the prince and Baileys had a secret. Igor then asked his friend to stay alive, but he was very sorry that Baileys had been treated so cruelly. Igor's first rebellion was a success. Now Baileys understood that Igor was again making an adult decision. This is the girl they went to the port for 6 years ago. The servant could not understand why Igor was so nervous. He looked very worried. The king said he never thought this could happen, that he will meet Rihanna soon. Now the servant understood what the king's message to Arendelle meant. Igor thought that the servant had come to offer to refuse the marriage. But then I wanted to find out what happened between the king and the girl earlier. After all, they met in the palace when they were children. And the queen is also from the ruling family of Crichton. So this girl was the guy's target from the very beginning. Therefore, he decided to write in the requirements about a lady from the royal family of marriageable age. Of course, this is hard to believe. But the hero really had such a plan. In the servant's eyes, it was cruel to start a war when a guy could simply propose to a girl. Although then she could run away later. The king's acquittal did not make him any better in the eyes of his friend and servant. At this time, a carriage with a girl was approaching the port. That day was clear and warm. It is very pleasant to be near the water at this time. But Rihanna was thinking about something completely different. Actually, like any girl dressed in a wedding dress. Her beauty that day was unusual, and memories of the previous conversation with the prince surfaced in my head. The girl does this for her brother. Only this thought calmed her. After all, the girl's fate had already been decided. It was hard for her to remember unflattering words addressed to her. Helena's brother gave them to her on the day of the last meeting. It was hard for her to believe and accept that her friend considered her insignificant. It turns out that it was Helena who asked her brother not to touch Rihanna, despite the fact that the hero liked her. The girl, of course, was surprised by her friend's act. The prince saw his sister during a meeting of Crichton's parliament. The princess came there. Some of those present even thought that she wanted to agree to the marriage. But she had no intention of challenging the royal family's parliamentary decision, and all because women do not have such a right. Helena supported the council's decision. But the girl also asked for the creation of a fraternal union between her and the royal family. It is impossible not to note the prince's extreme surprise at this sister's decision. This privilege ensured immunity. It can be bestowed once in a lifetime by a member of the royal family, an individual or an entire family. If such a proposal was voiced at a parliamentary meeting, immunity is guaranteed immediately. Eden agreed with his sister's decision only because she did not want to be in her friend's place. Then it will be easier to dissuade everyone and send Rihanna. And the authority of Marquis Previous will grow. Although the hero could not understand why his sister was protecting her friend, he decided to agree. The girl said that although Eden is her brother, she will not let Rihanna be offended. Helena tried to protect her friend as best she could. When the girl found out about this, she was very pleased. When Rihanna had an audience with the prince, it was the last day that an answer could be given regarding the marriage. Therefore, it was necessary to go to the port immediately. There she stated that she had come to marry, and the process of sending her was greatly accelerated. The prince also promised that when the girl and the king got married, the cousin would be freed. And so she arrived at the port. When she saw the golden statue of Artaxia in the port, she was very surprised. This statue always appears in her life before important and pleasant events. The girl did not think that she would ever see this statue again. They say that if you touch it, the ship will return safely to Arendelle. The girl remembered that conversation on the ship with the sailor. She also remembered that she had to go back. This meant a new meeting with Igor. The girl approached the ship. She understood that the wedding would soon take place. But she was very afraid that her past life would not repeat itself. She was afraid to sit again on her own in a dark cell, being of no use to anyone. The girl remembered how she held poison in her hand, received from her sister. Rihanna didn't want to die alone again. This time she at least managed to say goodbye to her loved ones, and she had the opportunity to rest. Mary helped the girl board the ship. She will be safe there. This time Rihanna had nothing to fear. This is not the same Igor from the past. Everything is great. And in Cretan, Igor was already waiting for his beloved to arrive. The servant tried to distract him from difficult thoughts, at least by talking. The first thing the servant asked was, did Igor regret that he did not meet the lady in advance? And then one could understand why she ran away. But the king did not want to carry on a conversation with the servant. He asked him not to tell anyone about what happened 6 years ago until the king himself gives permission. The king also asked the servant not to say anything about Rihanna. He was afraid that the girl might find out about that situation. And now the bride from Crichton was on the way. So Baileys went to meet her. On the day of rebirth, Igor went in search of Rihanna. It seemed that at that moment she was running away from someone or something. Fortunately, the king managed to find out exactly where she had gone. And then Igor realized, most likely the girl remembers the past. She was only 12 years old then, but she kicked out her own father using the right of inheritance. Perhaps she remembered his words before the wedding. Then he invited her to think about it and make a choice whether she would be on his side. Will she be an ally of the crown prince? Or perhaps she even remembered his words that, apart from his mother, there was most likely nothing between them. But it would be better if she didn't remember these words. Just like the situation when her sister pestered Igor, and Rihanna came into the room. But if the girl realizes that Igor remembers everything, It will be worse. The king was afraid that then she would definitely run away. He was afraid of losing her again. And now you can already hear guests near the door. And the king is standing in the room covering his face with his hands. He had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Now the king will finally meet Rihanna. The girl also couldn't wait to meet Igor. And now this long-awaited moment has come. They met again. Bailey's had just met the girl, greeting her by name and surname when she entered the port. Rihanna recognized the servant. Although they haven't seen each other for a long time, he looks younger now. Bailey's couldn't understand why the girl was looking at him so strangely. Rihanna thought that the servant did not know about her yet. It seemed that something confused the servant in the heroine's behavior. Perhaps this was due to the fact that the girl was not used to her last name. It seems that they addressed her this way only in childhood. The servant tried not to reveal that he already knew the heroine in absentia, fearing the king's punishment. And the girl thought that the servant only remembered her as a child. The girl's mother often brought her to the royal palace. The servant escorted the girl to the right room. Rihanna understood that she was different in the past. Previously, the girl acted on the orders of other people, but now she decided to be independent. She again decided to live a different life, in which she would no longer succumb to fear and hatred. In this life, Igor became a completely different person, and now the girl is standing in front of the door. She needs to enter the room where the man who was once her husband stands. It was very awkward, scary, but at the same time she wanted to see him. The doors opened. Their gazes met. They stood and looked at each other, remembering their past lives. Tears and emotions, happiness and betrayal that they experienced. Their past life together flashed before everyone's eyes. There were so many pleasant moments that we had to go through together. How much pain this ultimately brought. The king was the first to decide to break the silence. The first phrase he said was, "Long time no see." But it's true, they haven't met since childhood. When they met, the girl bowed to the king. She looked at him and realized that he had really changed. In this life, he is completely different. The king invited the girl to sit at the table. He was pleased to look after his beloved, but he tried not to reveal his feelings. Igor remembered how he cared for his wife before. I remembered touching her hair. I remembered her voice and what she called it. These pictures floated before his eyes. It was hard for him to control himself. Fortunately, the tea arrived quite quickly. Now Igor could be distracted by something. He sat at the table across from Rihanna. The servant who brought the tea wished for a pleasant time together. The girl thanked the king for the opportunity to talk alone. After all, they are old friends. Nice to meet you after so many years. The king told how he learned about the girl's whereabouts. His mother told him. During the conversation, Igor often smiled, and this smile haunted the girl. Now the hero was very different from the one she knew. The girl said that she lived with her uncle and cousin all this time, and when she came to them, she already knew what it meant to live well. As a child, due to her stepsister's jealousy, she did not receive love and support, and after moving to the palace because of the queen and her intrigues, the girl's past life was full of misfortunes. But she didn't talk about that now. All that remains is the reluctance to repeat that life. The girl said that she asked for a personal meeting with the king to tell him something. However, he interrupted her. Igor said that refusal of marriage would not be considered, and this issue is not discussed. Rihanna said she wanted to talk about something else. She asked that the king choose her rather than Princess Helena as his bride. This request caused great surprise to the king. He couldn't believe what he heard. She really asked to choose her as the bride. Meanwhile, Dima was imprisoned in the dungeon of the royal palace of Cretan. The guard opened the gate and said he could go out. The hero was very surprised that he was being released. He even thought that something had happened to Rihanna. The guard told the guy that they were waiting for him outside. Dima thought it was his sister, so he joyfully ran towards him. He ran to the carriage, and only when he was close did he see the girl turn around. This was not his sister at all. It was her friend Helena. The girl wanted to go with Dima to Rihanna. Perhaps she can be saved. The princess knew that her brother had sent her to the port. It is hoped that the king of Arendelle has not yet accepted Rihanna as his bride. However, the prince would insist on this. The king of Arendelle stated that he would leave Crichton only when he received a bride. Dima really wanted to say goodbye to his sister, but before that he needed to warn his father. The girl said that she had already talked to Marquis. He also promised to come there. Having received the news from the girl's nanny, the Marquis was surprised. The nanny was worried about the girl, because there had been no news from the girl since the moment she was taken to the royal palace. She conveyed the news that we needed to go to the port. The heroes immediately began to gather. After that, they left, but the ship with Rihanna has already sailed. The king watched the ship from the shore. Now everything has been decided. He ordered a delegation to be sent to Crichton's palace immediately. It was necessary to find out what the royal family was saying about international marriage. The servant thought that the conversation with the girl did not go very well. After all, the king seems to be evil. Therefore, Bailey said that he would urgently give orders about this. The king could not understand why even in such a situation the girl remained cold towards him. He realized that the past had hurt her greatly. Now we'll find out what the king talked about with Rihanna. The girl mentioned that this marriage is a peace agreement between the two countries. She is the one most suitable for marriage, as she has inherited the ancestry of both countries. Igor couldn't believe what he was hearing now. He didn't expect the girl to speak like that. She used to be very quiet and stayed away from politics, but now she is actively involved in it, and acts as a mediator between countries. Then it seemed to the king that the girl had also been reborn. If so, things are bad, but outwardly she remained the same. Rihanna also looked down in embarrassment. For the king, this look was very familiar. Whatever it was, even if she was reborn. The most important thing is that they met. This is a chance to change everything, a chance to conquer Rihanna again. The girl asked if the king agreed to these conditions, but that was not the point. Her motivation was not clear to the king. Igor thought that the girl was driven by something else, since she was offering such a thing. He wanted to know what she needed. The king asked Rihanna's real opinion about marriage. She didn't want to immediately say that she was doing this in order to get Dima out of prison. This reason would hardly have satisfied the king. Or maybe it would even make things more complicated. A thought struck the girl, and she decided to make it a plan. Rihanna said she would ask for a divorce a year after their wedding. The king was very surprised how a girl could ask for a divorce without even being married. However, she repeated the request. Not even a request, but a prayer that the king would marry her and divorce her in a year. Divorce for any reason. Let it be infertility or high treason, but only so that he agrees to fulfill the request. These words greatly shocked the king. After all, he hoped to marry a girl for life. He understood that he still loved her. He doesn't want to live without her later, and she asks for a divorce. Igor's heart became heavy from these words. But this is at least a chance to fix everything. Although small, there is a chance. But then, as we remember, the girl left with his servant. The king told Bailey about the situation. Now the marriage is concluded, you can return home. However, there was something alarming about the guy's behavior. The king was very unfriendly with the servant after that conversation. Bailey's handed the letter to the guy, but he got angry as soon as he read it. Igor crumpled this letter and threw it away. It's time to find out what was in this letter. It said that the crown prince imprisoned Rihanna's cousin and threatened her. If she had not become a bride instead of a princess, he would have been executed. So she decided on it and agreed to the marriage. The servant was surprised by the king's reaction. Although the girl suffered such hardships, she hardly wanted to deceive them. Now there is no point in paying attention to this when everything is decided with the marriage. The king received what he asked for, including the bride, and lost nothing. Now that it's over, Crichton must pay for this deception. And the king was ready to act decisively. The next day, in the harbor of Sevion, people discussed the events taking place in the state. The war between Crichton and Arundel finally ended in an international marriage. Rihanna had to come back again. She couldn't change her fate. But fortunately, the girl was soon lucky to meet guests. It was her uncle and nanny. Seeing the girl, Mary was incredibly happy and rushed to hug her. This situation seemed very unfair to the nanny. The girl was sent away so suddenly that she couldn't even say goodbye to her. However, the heroine assured the guests that she was fine. The Marquis said that the girl's mother would be proud of her. Rihanna believed that she had brought trouble to her loved ones. If the girl could say goodbye to her brother, her soul would feel better. And he should have been released soon. Or rather, they have already been released. And he even managed to get to the harbor where his sister was. This meeting turned out to be even more unexpected and pleasant. It seemed like this couldn't happen. But Dima is with them now. He was finally released. The heroes were very happy to meet each other. It turned out that the princess helped Dima. It was thanks to Helena that he was released earlier. And she also called her uncle and nanny. Yes, it was the princess who invited everyone to Rihanna. The girl herself watched their meeting from the carriage. Helena was glad that her friend was safe now. The governess, who was sitting next to the princess, invited her to go out and say goodbye to her friend. After all, it is unknown whether they will have their next meeting. But the princess was ashamed. She did not want to spoil the joy of those around her. After all, it was Helena who initially had to go as a hostage. But I didn't go. Then the girl realized that she should not only seem strong, but also be so. A few seconds later, she saw Rihanna standing near the carriage. From surprise, the princess at first couldn't even find words. So Rihanna broke the silence herself. She said she couldn't miss this last chance to say goodbye to her friend. Only after these words did the princess decide to get out of the carriage. She tearfully began to ask her friend for forgiveness. After all, Helena herself wanted her friend to be sent there instead of her. Rihanna could not be angry with her friend, because she helped her family a lot, and even forged the royal decree for Dima's release. Then the governess got out of the carriage. She said that the crown prince himself told the council to make Rihanna a hostage. The princess could not stop him since he put her under house arrest. But they managed to get out because the prince was busy with other things. The governess reminded the princess that if this became known, the prince would understand everything. And after that, he can lock the girl up again for a while. But the princess did not want to listen to it. There is no need to spoil your mood now. Helena really wanted her friend to live nearby all her life. But it is clear that this will not happen. It's a pity. Rihanna asked the girl not to apologize to her. For example, you can imagine that she is going on a trip to Arendelle instead of her friend. Rihanna was afraid to admit that she appreciated her friend because she hated her past. But thanks to Helena, she managed to overcome the grief from her past. There were no more disagreements between the girls. They wished each other happiness. Then the guests were forced to return home. The latest events in the country were discussed at Crichton's palace. The damage caused by the war was quite great. But thanks to this war, the prince's position strengthened. So to some extent, he was even lucky. The war ruined the reputation of Privius, who constantly interfered with the prince. And Helena ended up staying at Crichton. Thus, 2 birds with 1 stone were killed. And then the prince began to think that it might be possible to reduce the presence of Privius in his life. The prince recalled that it was not in vain that he gave permission to call his sister Rurika simply by name. The servant realized that there was some kind of plan behind these words. So he tried to quit the game. The servant said that he simply expressed himself incorrectly. He wanted to pay due respect to the princess, but he said the wrong words. Eden realized that it was not yet time for his plan. However, the prince told Rurik that he wanted to possess Rihanna. Therefore, he will pay for offering to send her instead of the princess. In this case, he will have to try harder if he still wants to marry the princess. And in Arendelle, Rihanna's guests have already left. The time has come for her to go to her new home. She stood on the deck of the ship and looked at the shore. The girl understood that her requests were no different from gambling. While talking with the king, tears appeared in her eyes. But it was the best she could do for Dima. There was, of course, another way out, but it was too risky. Therefore, after the king agreed, the girl offered to sign the contract. Igor noticed that the girl had not forgotten the traditions of her country, even though she lived in Crichton. Indeed, the agreement had to be signed immediately. After this, the girl was relieved, realizing that her brother would definitely survive. A servant approached her and invited her to go down to the room. Walking into her cabin, she was surprised at how luxurious the place was. It didn't look at all like the cabin of a warship. The room seemed to simply glow. The servant said that the cabin was prepared hastily, but he hoped that the girl would like it. Since this is a warship, there are no specially equipped cabins for ladies. However, the girl realized that they had done a good job for her. And of course, she really liked it. The servant joked that his good work could be celebrated in front of the king. The girl understood what he was talking about and agreed. Later it turned out that the girl did not take the maid with her, and there were no maids on the ship. The girl was ready to take care of herself. Therefore, Baileys had nothing to fear. When the servant left, she lay down on the bed to rest. It was just the beginning, but she was already tired. All this was for the sake of Dima, who should have already been home safe and sound. The girl missed her brother very much. And of course, for a friend, for a nanny, and for other close people who remained in Crichton. The carriage they were traveling in was already approaching the house. The nanny did not want to let the girl go alone. After all, she could go with her. Dima tried to calm Mary down. The Marquis also joined the conversation. He mentioned the courage of the girl who, at the age of 12, persuaded her nanny to go with her to Crichton. Therefore, she will be fine. The nanny remembered the girl's words in which she asked not to participate in the celebration of the founding of Crichton. After all, it is unknown what dangers could await there. This is despite the fact that all members of the royal family are required to attend the celebration. Dima thought that they might be able to get out of it by saying that they were not members of the royal family in a direct line. Perhaps Rihanna's friend might know the reason for these words. Or the reason could have something to do with the crown prince. At this time, another meeting was taking place in Crichton's palace. The princess decided to visit him. Approaching those present, she asked them to listen to her. After this, the prince asked everyone present to leave, and he gave the princess his word. Still, Eden hoped that his sister would not ask to become a hostage instead of her friend in order to make amends. Helena was surprised that her brother felt no remorse. After all, in this situation, he is the only one who benefited from the current circumstances, and everyone else suffers. The girl realized what her brother's plan was, inciting war and blaming Parliament, a threat to the great family of Privius, and even Rihanna was made a hostage of Arundel. The girl did not understand why her brother was so irresponsible and self-confident. After all, he is the prince and heir of Crichton, and soon he will become the legitimate ruler of this country. So it's better not to let anyone get in his way. Eden was not even going to protect his sister out of family feelings. Besides, he also had something to say to his sister. This concerned the act that the girl committed for the sake of her friend, when she offered to connect the Privius family and clan. Helena did this without consulting her brother. The prince asked that this not happen again, so that in future she would listen to him carefully. The girl understood that her brother wanted to use her, but she still didn't know why she shouldn't have come to the celebration. Rihanna didn't tell anyone about this. She only warned her friend that the guy considers his sister a thing and can use her. Sometime later, Rihanna woke up on a ship that was sailing to Arundel. The girl had been dizzy since the morning. She needed to take the medicine that Mary gave her, but it seems Rihanna hasn't even unpacked her bags. Now is the time for this. The nanny must have had to pack things in a hurry. However, she managed to put tea in her suitcase. Among the cups, the girl found a bottle of medicine. It was this medicine that Mary asked to take 1 drop a day. Every day. And this despite the fact that it is so bitter. If you don't do this, the dizziness will continue. We have to endure this bitterness. The girl recently broke up with her nanny, but already missed her very much. At this time, Bailey's knocked on the room. He wanted to take the girl to dinner. Before entering her room, the servant wondered if now was the right time to disturb her guest. And yet he did not dare to disturb Rihanna. Bailey's went to Igor and said that the girl, in his opinion, was not feeling well. The king was upset because he was waiting for dinner together. However, the servant insisted that the girl had better rest. Igor began to worry whether everything was okay with Rihanna. To get out of the situation, Bailey suggested making lunch a few hours later. Then the girl would have time to rest, and she would be in a better mood. But the king did not agree with this. The servant tried to stop him, saying that he should not disturb a tired man. Bailey's tried to stop Igor from seeing Rihanna cry, but Igor was persistent. He couldn't just leave the situation like that. Since he is her fiancé, who should know about her health? They and the servant approached the girl's cabin. At this time, she stood and looked out the window, enjoying the beautiful scenery. And in her hand, she just had a bottle of medicine. Without seeing either Igor or the servant, she drank this medicine. And then the guy realized that the girl was really sick. He wanted to know what was wrong with her. After all, he worries about her. The king remembered that in a previous life she drank poison from a similar bottle. The guy was very worried that it could be that same bottle, and that after that he won't see her again. Something had to be done quickly. The king ran with all his might to the girl's room. He tried to stop her in time. The servant ran after him. When Igor ran to Rihanna, she was still standing near the window. He pushed the girl to the floor and took the medicine from her hand. The heroine could not understand what the king was doing. However, the guy couldn't understand what Rihanna was doing. He thought that the girl wanted to poison herself. After all, she had previously asked for an audience. Igor began to think that the agreement was just a ruse. The guy was extremely angry. He grabbed the girl by the hands and said that he would rather kill her himself. After all, it will be hard for him to see her do it herself. The servant finally reached the girl's room. He was surprised by what he saw. Bailey's decided to protect Rihanna because he did not understand the king's motives. The servant helped the girl get up from the floor. But Igor, still angry, asked Bailey's to leave. He wanted to talk to the lady himself. Although the servant's task is to obey, he refused. The man even asked Igor to come out. Yes, it was Igor who had to leave the room. The servant decided to express what he thought about Igor's action right in front of the girl. After all, he could not understand why he would kidnap a bride from another country. Also, he could not stand by when the king attacked the lady. Rihanna was already able to defend herself, so she told the servant that she and the king really needed to explain themselves. Therefore, she repeated the king's request that Bailey's leave the chambers. Only after this, the servant agreed to leave. But if something happened, he asked the girl to turn to him for help. Now she was ready to find out why the king almost broke her ribs. The king began to shout, asking a question about the medicine. The girl said that she has been drinking this medicine since childhood. It is for relieving tension and is made from medicinal herbs. But Igor objected, because the girl was now a queen. Now everything she consumes must be thoroughly tested. It doesn't matter if it's medicine, food, or drink. Although it's strange, because the medicine was prescribed by her uncle's family doctor. This man could hardly deceive the girl, and besides, she had been drinking him for a long time. The girl saw no reason to be afraid. Time has shown that the medicine is safe, but the king could not agree with her. This medicine may have been useful in the past, but now Rihanna must follow the orders of the Arendelle doctors. The king threatened that if he sees that the girl is again taking medications that he does not know about, the consequences will be even worse. This scared the girl. If worse, then perhaps the king meant that he would beat her. But if Rihanna breaks the ban, she will find out what he meant. This made the girl think, because Igor had not been so caring towards other people before. Perhaps this is due to the fact that she is now his wife, and not just some other person. Although the wedding had not yet taken place, the king already considered Rihanna his wife. Formally, she will be one only in a year, but now the girl must do what the king orders. The heroine again reminded that there was no wedding yet, but the guy continued to say that he would protect her. Although it was hard to call such an attack on a girl a defense, Igor decided to end the conversation quickly so as not to quarrel with Rihanna. Now her life has become different, completely different from what it was in Cretan. The girl needed to act in accordance with her new status. These thoughts were unpleasant to her, since she remembered how she was taught manners. Now these manners need to be applied. Since she is the queen of Arendelle, she should act like it. After all, everyone pays attention to the queen's behavior. For a moment, the girl forgot who she had become on this ship. Therefore, she had to agree with Igor's words. We must be more prudent in future. She's just a hostage instead of a princess. Rihanna said she will never forget who she really is. The girl dreamed that when she saw the king again, he would be caring. But she didn't see him like that. And this greatly upset the heroine. So she called a servant and asked him to escort the king from her chambers. Igor went to his room. He sat on the bed, covering his face with his hands, and began to think. What an awkward situation this turned out to be. Igor remembered the look on Rihanna's face when she promised him not to forget who she really is. It seems he offended her greatly. But the king did not want things to turn out this way. The presence of a servant in the room only increased his worries. Bailey said that he did not expect such behavior from the king. The servant expressed surprise at this attack on the lady. He could have simply taken the medicine. If you treat a girl so rudely, then apparently it would have been better not to get married. Unexpectedly for the servant, the king asked why Rihanna did not have a personal maid on the ship. Bailey's began to make excuses. He mentioned that the lady said it was because she was in a hurry. Although then the servant could report this to the king before sailing. Then this situation would not have happened. But at that moment, everyone was thinking about readiness for marriage, and not about servants. The servant learned about the absence of the maid after the ship had sailed. Lady Rihanna promised Bailey's to personally tell the king about the absence of the maid. The servant was almost like the king's right hand. Therefore, he had to control this. The king ordered that before arriving in Arendelle, a servant would stand at Rihanna's door and serve her. And most importantly, never leave the girl alone, so that she is always under supervision. After these words, the king put Bailey's out the door and ordered him to carry out the order. The king was very upset about what happened. He finally realized that the girl could not be left alone now. This could not have been done before. Igor realized that it was true that his behavior did not look like defense. The reason for the strange attitude towards the medicine originated in the events of the past. One day the king lost consciousness. He came to his senses only a few days later. His mother, with tearful apologies, was next to his bed at that moment. Igor thought that the queen wanted him to die, but her plan didn't work. These words then surprised the queen. It was hard for her to believe that her son had such an opinion of her. The guy noticed that day that no one was talking about Rihanna. as if on purpose. But she was pregnant and was about to give birth to a child. At that moment, the guy realized that he was sincerely worried about his wife. After the question about Rihanna, everyone remained silent. Therefore, the guy himself decided to find out where she was. Igor called Baileys into the room. The servant entered the room with a sword. The queen was surprised why the royal chambers should be taken into the sword. In her opinion, only a crazy person could do this. The first thing the servant said was that he was glad that the king had woken up. Now Igor needs to save the queen. Herdia tried to stop the servant, who began to say something that could ruin the queen's reputation. She even tried to kick him out. But Baileys managed to say that Rihanna had been convicted of treason and was in prison. Igor could not understand how he dared to allow this to happen. After all, his family life was just beginning to improve. The Queen Dowager tried to explain the situation to her son in her own way. She believed that she had done the right thing and had nothing to apologize for. After all, the traitor was caught. Igor was very angry because of his mother's actions. It seemed that he was even ready to kill her. The king asked the servant if he had found what he was asked for. After this, the servant handed the bag with this item to Igor. The queen was surprised that the servant still found this item. When the bag was opened, those present saw a bottle of poison. Igor realized that it was intended for his wife. That's why he reacted so strongly this time when Rihanna took medication. The next day they went to the palace. The horses were clattering their hooves and a carriage was driving behind them. Igor, sitting in it, looked at his beloved wife, Rihanna. She was sleepy. The king said that he had a bad dream. Apparently he was so tired that he began to dream about the past. The girl didn't listen to him at all. She barely sat in the carriage, trying not to fall asleep at all. Her face turned pale. The doctor recommended that she take medication for insomnia. But Igor did not understand what to do. I didn't understand why he behaved like that yesterday and why he said such words to the girl. But then he was very scared. I couldn't even say anything normal. Baileys advised the guy to tell the girl about his feelings. But this may not help resolve the misunderstanding. Rihanna continued to fall asleep in the carriage. This alarmed Igor. He reached out his hand to touch the girl's hair. But at that moment she completely fell asleep, and the guy picked her up. It seems he shouldn't have listened to the doctor. Time will tell if this is true. And then the harnessed carriage drove up to the estate. The girl had been sleeping all this time on the road, but now she woke up. Unexpectedly, Rihanna saw that she was sleeping on her husband's lap. They were approaching the palace, which was the estate of Count Allison. The king decided that since the girl had not been there for a long time, she should go there first. It was a very pleasant surprise for Rihanna. After so many years she saw her estate. The girl felt that she had returned home. She thought that she would not miss him because she could not be happy there. Her happiest moments were with her mother. Like any child, the girl was pleased to feel her mother's hugs, accept her love and see her happy eyes. But when her mother died, the girl decided that nothing good awaited her here anymore. The estate manager was immediately informed that the royal carriage was approaching. The owners could not understand the reason for such a sudden visit. When the carriage stopped, the servants greeted the guests. They were also surprised by the king's arrival. Baileys was the first to leave the carriage. He introduced himself and said that the visit was sudden because it was planned immediately after the queen's arrival. Since some of those in the carriage wanted to call on the owners of the house, the king had to pay a visit. Next, Lady Allison stepped out of the carriage. The servant recognized the girl. Rihanna also recognized Jeffrey. They were previously on good terms. It's hard to imagine how much time has passed since their last meeting. The girl thought that Jeffrey would no longer recognize her after so many years. But it was impossible not to recognize, because she is very similar to her mother. Next, the girl's old acquaintance decided to pay attention to the king, but he refused. Igor invited Jeffrey to continue the conversation with Lady Allison. The guy realized that stopping near the estate was a good idea. Deciding to take a walk near the palace, he saw 2 graves along the way. Rihanna's parents were buried there. Later, the girl herself came there. She saw her father lying next to her mother. Rihanna doesn't know if this was her mother's request or outright revenge, but what is clear is that the parents are buried nearby. The king approached the girl holding the girl's favorite flowers in his hands. The guy sat down near the grave and put these flowers on it. Rihanna said that Igor saw her mother when he was very little. She was, of course, surprised how the guy could remember what flowers she liked. And Igor remembered the girl's mother. That day he fell from a tree for the first time in his life. It was hard for both of them to forget this day. In a past life, Immediately after the death of the countess, the father brought his illegitimate daughter into the house and bullied Rihanna all her life. But he was buried next to his wife, whom he cheated on. It was very shameless. For some reason, Igor considered himself the same traitor. Perhaps this is because when he was next to her, he did not notice her suffering. And now he's trying to get her back. He, of course, regretted what happened on the ship. These actions were too drastic. Therefore, the guy decided to clarify this situation. He explained that he did not consider the girl a hostage. Despite the fact that according to the agreement their marriage will not last long, he will try to protect her. In a past life, Igor sought to win the love of Rihanna. The guy sincerely wanted the girl to see the real him, but from her past life, only pain remained in her memories. Now the guy realized that if she doesn't love him, it's not a big deal. After all, for him just being next to her is already a miracle. So he tried not to worry about it. The present has changed. Sitting near the grave, he took her hands. Looking into the girl's eyes, Igor really wanted everything to be different from how it was in his previous life. Rihanna saw the warmth in his eyes. She felt very calm from this look. Now Igor had a chance. Although he persuaded the girl to marry by force, he can make sure that she no longer suffers. This time he succeeded in making everyone in this country subordinate to him, even those people who were on his mother's side before. The guy really hoped that when he confessed everything to Rihanna, she would forgive him. And the girl really wanted him not to love her before the marriage was completed. She didn't want him to get hurt later. They made such wishes at that moment. The next day everyone was already in the capital of Arendelle. Igor did not plan to organize magnificent ceremonies in the palace in honor of his arrival. He wanted to have a quick wedding. Nevertheless, their meeting was very bright and solemn. They were even greeted by musicians. Walking alongside her servants on the red carpet, Rihanna truly felt like a queen. One of the maids even greeted the girl with the words, "Your Majesty, Queen." This surprised Rihanna because the wedding had not yet taken place and she was not technically queen yet. The king introduced this woman to the girl. This was the main maid who was supposed to serve Rihanna. Her name was Lady Cecily. Her late husband was a duke. They had a large estate in the south of the country. They came from an ancient family whose roots stretched back to Arendelle. In her past life, Duchess Cecily had great influence in society, but after the death of her husband, she constantly remained on the estate. Rihanna was pleased to meet the lady. Since Rihanna planned to leave after a year, she decided not to make close friends with anyone. She didn't even have good memories of these people. Another maid brought her a glass of an unknown drink. Rihanna was scared to take it, especially after the incident with the dizziness medication. But the maid insisted that the girl drink it too. This drink helps you get pregnant. It was the queen's order to give it to the heroine. Rihanna drank the drink and wished the maid well. Rihanna asked Igor if she should talk to the queen, and when is the best time to do so. However, the guy forbade her to do this. He really didn't want his mother to date Rihanna. Therefore, the king invited the girl to rest after the journey. Strange, but she still wanted to find the queen. Rihanna didn't know she wasn't in the palace. The queen was now in the summer castle and there was no need to worry about her. Rihanna was surprised by Igor's reluctance regarding their meeting. The servant invited the king and the girl to go further, as others were waiting for them to greet them. Lady Cecily took Rihanna with her to show her to the room. The girl agreed and said goodbye to the king. After that, she left with the maid. But Rihanna was haunted by the thought of why Igor was against her meeting with the queen. The maid led the girl to the new palace, where she was supposed to stay until the wedding, since her residence was not yet ready. A few months ago, the king ordered the restoration of the queen's palace. Rihanna had a hard time understanding how this could happen so early. The king ordered the work to begin early, which could indicate that he had planned everything in advance. Yes, he predicted his victory. The girl heard that in this life Igor became very smart. She was surprised at how much he had changed. The hero was very different from himself in his previous life. The girl was ashamed at the thought that she was planning to run away. Rihanna was curious to know what kind of life Igor led this time. So she had to live for a month in the palace where Queen Herdia had previously lived. The maid said that she knew that the girl visited this palace several times in her childhood, when she and her mother went to visit the queen. The memories could not leave the girl indifferent. The queen was very kind to her at that time. She was not only her mother's friend, but also her godmother. Rihanna sent her a letter when she left. The maid knew about Rihanna's close relationship with the queen in the past. The young girl decided to ask the lady how the queen was doing now. The maid reported that Herdia was in perfect order. She left politics and left the palace. The queen moved to Berga Castle several years ago. She did not like the affairs of the royal palace. All remaining items were sent to her new home. The maid once again reminded the king's words that there was no need to worry about the queen. But the girl thought that the queen had been kicked out of the palace. Whether to worry about it or not is up to her to decide. What was Igor thinking when he brought this maid? The girl considered herself not so naive as to believe her every word. Later, the maid looked at the girl and laughed. Rihanna was surprised by this. She didn't understand why the maid was laughing. However, the lady quickly began to apologize to Her Majesty. The girl stopped her, saying that she was not a queen yet, so there was no need to observe such formalities. But in fact, this was due to the fact that the girl was accustomed to the ridicule of noble ladies. The maid once again asked Rihanna for forgiveness. After all, the lady didn't really want to laugh at her. After they met, the lady realized that the king should not have worried so much about the girl. About a year ago, His Majesty summoned Lady Cecily to his place. He said that the queen would soon appear and she would need an assistant. When the war comes to an end, he will get married. The king wanted the lady to start preparing for the wedding. She also took care of the queen, his bride. The lady spoke of how kindly the king spoke of his future bride. This seemed strange to her. Previously, the king was not interested in girls. The lady also knew that the new queen would not have a high status. Rihanna became interested in this story, and she began to ask who was originally supposed to become the new queen. But the lady didn't know about it. The king was worried that the future bride was not familiar with the royal court of Arendelle. The guy ordered all preparations to be completed for their arrival. Igor really started planning everything in advance. But the girl thought that, most likely, Igor wanted to marry the Princess of Craigton. She was also haunted by the thought of why he so easily agreed to her marriage contract. Perhaps he has other goals. This made the lady laugh. The girl tried to get all thoughts about Igor out of her head, but it didn't work. The lady stood up and explained the reason for her laughter. She said it happened unconsciously, thinking about how much the king cared about Rihanna. The lady did not mean to make fun of her in any way. The girl reassured the Duchess, saying that everything was fine. She understood that the woman could be very embarrassed about this incident. This is their first meeting, and she understood that she must remain safe until marriage. Rihanna asked the maid to tell her about the king and his mother. It was also necessary to find a person here who knows the high society well, and the girl hoped that the lady would help her. At the same time, Igor and his servant were in the king's office. They discussed Rihanna's first meeting with the Duchess. Bailey's head was spinning from how many times the king asked the servant's opinion on this matter. It seemed easier for the king to check everything himself. The guy trusted the Duchess, so he asked her to be the girl's maid. It seemed disrespectful to him to ask whether his fiancée liked the maid, even though the guy was very concerned about this question. The servant could not understand why the king did this to Rihanna if he was worried about her. The guy has a strained relationship with his mother, but such an act towards Rihanna is cruel. The servant remembered that after a long time the girl returned to her native country, so it would be nice for her to greet the Queen Dowager. In his thoughts, Igor decided to reconsider his decision. But in a past life, the queen used Rihanna as a tool to increase her power. Therefore, the guy was afraid to let his mother near the bride. She also brought the girl to death. The king was very afraid of their future meeting. And then Duchess Cecily entered the office. She came because she thought the king was worried about the queen. Over a cup of aromatic tea, a pleasant conversation took place for everyone. The king praised the Duchess for her excellent work. He also asked how the queen was feeling now. This was the first time the woman had seen him worry so much about a girl. After all, there were even rumors in the kingdom that he liked men. The Duchess said that the queen is much stronger than the king thinks. Although this was the girl's first meeting with the Duchess, Rihanna had the courage to ask about the queen. Igor realized that she did not need anyone's protection. She's stronger than he thought. Perhaps he never knew his wife well enough. At this time, the girl was in her room and getting ready to rest. She began to comb her long and soft hair. The maid offered to help her. The servants were surprised how the girl managed to be so beautiful. But she really was of unusual beauty. Rihanna said she would handle the procedure herself. The servants asked to speak more quietly about this so as not to be scolded. They should help Rihanna in everything. Then the girl dismissed the maids as she wanted to lie down to rest. The servants wished her good night and left the chambers. When the evening fell, Rihanna woke up and began to walk around the room looking out the window. Duchess Cecily entered the room. The girl decided to find out why she agreed to become her maid. However, the woman did not want to talk about it, so she decided to answer with a question. She asked why the girl had such a question. After all, in fact, His Majesty is indebted to her. Even before he came of age, the king wanted to free himself from his mother's care. The young king visited their estate and asked for her husband's help. Their family then remained neutral. Therefore, it was difficult for the duke to agree to take custody of the boy until he reached adulthood. He believed that this would be a betrayal of the queen. But the guy was persistent. And then the duchess saw for the first time the seriousness of the king. Taking advantage of the opportunity, she and her husband decided to help the boy. That's why the woman became Rihanna's maid. The girl became very interested in who won the hearts of the king. Who is the lady who caused such a serious look from His Majesty? The girl thought about this with longing in her eyes. She tried to reassure herself by saying that it shouldn't matter to her. The marriage ends in a year anyway. Rihanna and the maid ended the conversation and met only in the morning. The bright light of the sun penetrated into the girl's room. Out of habit, she whispered a request for Mary to close the curtains. But then Rihanna remembered that Mary was no longer around. And this is not her home, although the room was spacious and beautiful. Everything around was filled with flowers. The girl realized with chagrin that she was in this place again. The maids quickly entered the room. They wished Rihanna good morning and asked if she was okay. The servants were ready to help prepare the girl a bath or something else. Then Rihanna realized that she didn't know these maids. There was not a single familiar face among them. Apparently, this life is really more different from the past than she expected. Rihanna asked where Lady Cecily was. She was just about to arrive soon. The servants helped the girl get ready to go out for breakfast. 100 dresses were prepared for her and she could choose anyone. The girl was very surprised by the king's generosity. She could not understand why Igor tried so hard and prepared so much for their marriage. She also couldn't understand how he found out her clothing size. The girl chose one of the dresses that suited her very well. Everything was ready for the exit. The dress was extremely comfortable to wear. The girl thought she was having déjà vu. Next, Lady Cecily came into the room with an apology for her lateness and invited the girl to go with her. The woman was surprised at how beautiful Rihanna was. It seemed to her that the girl was simply beaming. The lady understood the king's feelings. They both went out for breakfast. The king really wanted them to have breakfast together today. But the lady said that the girl was tired from the journey, and it would be better for her to have breakfast in solitude. Then the king asked about having dinner together. People might think that Rihanna and the king met after a long separation. The lady conveyed Igor's question to the girl, and she thought about the king's words because in a past life they rarely had meals together. That's why her look became a little sad. The duchess thought that she had offended the girl by making the decision on her own. Rihanna offered to convey to the king her consent to a joint dinner. After breakfast, the lady handed the girl a book. This was a list of modern aristocrats. The book contained information about everyone, from the lowest to the closest to the king clans. It would be nice for the girl to read this book before the wedding. And although she was determined, it was still hard for her. The girl was afraid that what had already happened in her past life would repeat itself. After all, the poor queen and her sisters stole her husband from her. There were also rumors throughout the kingdom that the king did not want to spend nights with the queen. Because of the girl's sad look, the maid thought that she was confused by so much information. Therefore, she asked not to worry too much about the book. In fact, everything was laid out in it quite simply. In addition, the lady was well acquainted with high society and knew all the local aristocrats very well. If she doesn't understand something, she can always rely on the duchess. After some time, the girl began to leaf through this book. In it, she found a familiar name. It was written about her sister, Letitia. She became the wife of Viscount House of Olbach. Having married a dying aristocrat, Letitia probably believed that she would receive an inheritance and become rich after the wedding. But in the end, she received only his debts. One day, while walking through the city, Letitia heard that there would be a royal wedding. The invitation stated that Igor Cheska, king of Arundel, had made peace with the royal family of Crichton. He planned to marry the count's daughter, Rihanna Allison. Letitia remembered how her older sister kicked her and her father out of the house as a child. The sister also took all the property for herself. If not for this, Letitia would now be next to Igor. In his free time, Igor trained in sword fighting at the sports arena. He needed to be especially careful. Each blow could have been the last. It was difficult for the guy to concentrate, as he was thinking about the future divorce from his wife. This was reflected in his training. If you press too hard on the swords, you may fall. Then you will lose, not your opponent. But Igor couldn't just leave the situation. He remembered past events again and again. The training was over and it was time to move on. Baileys followed the queen to accompany her to dinner. One of the servants informed the king that when he returned, his mother asked permission to visit. She needed to give him his answer. The queen dowager in her summer castle waited impatiently. And then a letter arrived. At that time, Hertzia had not met Rihanna for 6 years and really wanted to see her. Her son took power from her and did not allow her to hold meetings. The queen's maid offered her help, since she was preparing the royal wedding and could share information. The queen remembered how she took care of the girl when she came to visit her. This happened almost from the very birth of the child. Hertzia happily thought that after the wedding she would be able to return to her palace again. The maid had not seen the queen so joyful for a long time. The queen was expecting to meet her goddaughter. At this time the Prince of Crichton arrived in Arundel. He was met by Count Clovis, whom the prince decided to make his ally. And Rihanna got ready for dinner with the king in the evening. His Majesty sent her a necklace and earrings with sapphires, and really wanted the girl to wear them. At this time, Baileys was already waiting for her at the bottom of the estate. Rihanna managed to arrive on time. The girl was of extraordinary beauty, and all the servants standing below admired her appearance. In the whole kingdom, it seems, there would not have been such a beauty for the king. The servants escorted the girl to the carriage, and they went to the place where dinner with the king was to take place. Igor gave instructions to decorate the palace where the dinner was to be held with white roses. The servants did not have time to collect as many roses as the king wanted to see, but these roses also grew in the Dowager Queen's residence. They hoped that the queen would show her generosity and allow them to be picked. Everyone understood why Igor tried so hard. Obviously, he truly loves his chosen one. Along the way, she talked to Baileys about her childhood. The girl was surprised by some of the details that he remembered. She hoped they were going to the main palace, but the path was different. The trip was planned to the queen's palace. At that time, it had already been restored and had changed a lot. Previously, there was a lot of gold and marble in it, but now the interior of the palace was bright and cozy. It became a warm and pleasant place. The servant told the girl that now she would live in it, and she couldn't help but like this place. Reaching the stairs, Rihanna saw Igor. He was already waiting for her. From now on, he had to accompany her. In the hands of the guy there was a huge bouquet of white roses, which could not leave anyone indifferent. Rihanna was very grateful to him for such a gift. The king was glad that the girl put on the jewelry she had given her that day. She also wore an engagement ring. One of the meanings of sapphire is sincerity. Igor promised to be sincere in his marriage to her. But the girl was confused by this, since they had already discussed the specifics of marriage. The guy gallantly kissed Rihanna's hand, but she was surprised by His Majesty's action. The monarch, without letting go of her hand, looked confidently straight into her eyes, and he assured that now he would be her family. The girl told herself that it was all wrong, and she tried to calm herself down because in a year everything was supposed to end. She couldn't wait for it anymore. The groom did not let go of her hand and called on her to go with him. Rihanna tried to control herself. The couple walked up the steps covered with an azure carpet. They sat down at a table on which stood a candelabra with 5 candles. The waiter was already ready to set the table for them. 2 violinists and a cellist at the score entertained the guests with performances of popular melodies. Pleasant music flowed throughout the hall. Rana discreetly told the groom that it took a lot of time to prepare. The guy was holding a glass in his hand. He answered her with delight that the palace had been renovated, and he assured her that soon other parts of the palace would also be changed. The blonde, rather squinting her eyes, said that it was good. But then the expression on her face changed greatly. Her fiancé noticed this. He asked in surprise if Rihanna didn't like it. The girl assured that she liked it, and she reminded that she had already told Basil about this. The guy answered irritably that then she laughed and talked to him, but didn't say anything to him. The groom glanced sideways at the girl and reproached her for not even smiling at him. The waiter poured a drink into Rihanna's glass. The girl thought she had misheard, and she assumed that she misunderstood something because of the alcohol. But then I decided that I hadn't really drunk wine yet. Wine poured into an empty glass. The guy sat sulking, and it seemed he turned away to the side. Rihanna suggested that her fiancé was offended by her. They both made eye contact and each took a sip of wine from their glasses. The girl beamed. She guessed that Igor was asking her for a compliment, and thanking him, she answered him that she really liked everything. The husband looked at her intently without blinking. Rihanna, laughing loudly, said that she really liked it. Finally, Igor's face also broke into a smile. He assured the bride that he was glad to hear this from her. The blonde thought that this was the first time she had seen her groom smiling like that. The monarch was interested in how the preparations for the wedding were going. Rihanna replied that the Duchess helped her, so it wasn't difficult for her at all. The girl cut off a piece of juicy steak with a knife. She said that there was very little time. She insisted that she tried to make everything as simple as possible, and she tried to be more economical. Igor was surprised at her aspirations. He asked her to choose only the best: fabrics, jewelry, and anything else she wanted. Rihanna refused. After all this was prepared for Princess Crichton. She lowered her eyes, and she voiced that it was not worth spending so much money on a temporary marriage. Igor thought to himself that he had prepared all this for Rihanna, but he knew he couldn't tell the truth. After all, he knew that if he made a mistake, the girl would understand that he remembered everything. The man knew it was too early for this. He told the girl that he had prepared even more things. Rihanna was surprised and clarified what exactly. Igor replied that she would soon find out everything herself, and he promised to convey them through the Duchess. He convinced her to buy whatever she wanted, without thinking about the price. The girl thought that there was already a lot of stuff there, and I was surprised that there was something else. She wondered what Igor's attitude was towards this marriage. She understood that there was no point in objecting to the groom. After all, she knew that most of the expenses lay with the royal family, so it was not worth refusing those gifts. Rihanna agreed to do so with him. The guy was happy. He said that the bride made a great decision, and he promised that she would like everything. He asked her to eat more, bringing the plate closer to her. The girl refused, assuring that she was not hungry. The violinist, making smooth movements with his bow along the strings of the instrument, produced divine music. Igor stood up and called the girl with him. He invited her to go out to the terrace with him. He said he wanted to tell her something. The waning moon was shining in the night sky. The couple went out into the fresh air. The guy said that tomorrow he would leave the palace for 2 days. After all, he needed to visit the Prime Minister's estate. He asked to forgive him for being absent at such a moment, and he insisted that he had been planning that trip for a long time. The girl asked him not to worry. She assured him that she was fine so that he wouldn't worry so much about her. Igor noted sadly, thinking that there was a long distance between them again. He realized that Rihanna had already decided everything for herself, and the more time they spent together, the better he felt about that scene. The guy believed that if this continued, he would never be able to reunite with her, and he so desperately wanted to reach the girl's heart. He took Rihanna by the hands and spoke, looking straight into her eyes. He assured her that while he was away, some people might try to see her, and he asked them to refuse a meeting. The girl thought that she had not yet found out how things were here, and I had no plans to meet anyone yet. She knew there was only one person she couldn't ignore. It was the Queen Dowager. The guy asked what else bothered Rihanna. She smilingly denied this fact, and she thought that since she couldn't meet her right now, she would have to send a letter with a promise to pay her a visit later. Events take us to a summer castle. At night, the windows glowed with a soft glow. The woman bowed. She said that His Majesty was leaving tomorrow and now they could act. Herzia's hands trembled and her eyes burned. She wanted to meet Rihanna so badly. The maids were folding gift boxes, and they brought new ones into the dairy, now with decorations and valuables. The girl was surprised how much was prepared. It seemed to her as if the king had never intended to hold Princess Crichton hostage. The woman was delighted. She said that she could not even think that there would be so many gifts, and she assured that Rihanna won't have to worry about outfits for a while now. The woman threw a shawl over her head and asked Her Majesty if it suited her. The girl was having fun. A few hours ago, in front of the main entrance, the assembled servants and Rihanna saw off His Majesty. The guy was wearing a red cloak. The carriage was already ready. The accompanying people sat down on their horses. Igor cheerfully told his girlfriend that it was time for him to hit the road. His bride and maids unanimously wished him a good journey, curtsying. The young king asked Rihanna to come to him for a second. He extended his hand invitingly to her. A silent question froze on her face. Igor took her hand with one hand, and with the other he deftly pulled her towards him by the waist. The girl thought that he was too close to her. The groom told Rihanna not to be afraid, and he assured her that while she was here she could take whatever she wanted, and he convinced her that she deserved more. With sadness, the girl thought that he did not need to do this. After all, he thought so because she was supposed to become the future queen. The maid presented a box of jewelry to Rihanna. The girl said that if Igor had mentioned the gifts earlier, she would have asked her not to prepare so many of them. 736. The woman was holding a roll of fabric in her hands. She remembered how red Igor's face was, and she assumed that he must have been embarrassed at that moment. Rihanna didn't notice it at the time, and now I was sincerely surprised. The servant told her that not only girls can be shy. It was known that His Majesty had never met anyone, and he always tried to avoid the ladies of the court. Even when they met him by chance, he tried to get away from there as quickly as possible. It turned out that Igor gave gifts to the girl for the first time. Rihanna was surprised by this fact. The woman said that she was very worried about the king, whether he knew what he should have done on his wedding night. But then the girl remembered how confidently he behaved with her. This was very different from the behavior of an inexperienced guy. At this time there was a knock on the door. The servants bowed and informed Her Majesty that the Queen Dowager's court maid had arrived, and she brought Rihanna roses. She asked permission to let her in. The girl asked if a letter had not been sent to the Queen yesterday. The maid answered that they had sent it exactly. But this was the first time the Queen had sent her maid to them, and the maid asked what she should do, hurrying the mistress with an answer. Rihanna thought that since this was the Queen's man, she had no right to refuse her. She told me to invite him. 4 maids carried an incredible bouquet of roses. The girls were surprised and fascinated by such an abundance of flowers. The Queen's maid said that she had long wanted to greet Lady Allison, and she asked if Rihanna remembered her. The woman behaved confidently and diplomatically. Meanwhile, Igor was riding in a carriage. He was surprised that they had already arrived first. The guy with glasses said that it was secret information, that he asked the minister about this. His Majesty asked where they were supposed to meet. Bailey's replied that the meeting was planned in the Black Forest in the north of Calcis. Igor remembered that he often went there for reconnaissance in a past life, but because of the Queen, he could not then officially control the troops, so he pretended that he was going hunting. But after his rebirth, he strengthened his power and handed over the Black Forest to the minister. Farmland and a trading town were created there to reduce smuggling. At that time there were enough funds in the treasury for the development of maritime trade and the navy. But the biggest advantage was the ability to collect information about Toulouse. Igor believed that this was an empire with which it was possible to come to an agreement, and he considered it inappropriate to quarrel with them because of a far-fetched threat. And I thought it would be better to attract them to my side. The guy believed that this was just a pleasant bonus in his life. He wanted only one thing, for Rihanna to look at him again, and he didn't need anything else. Igor said that he would like to go back. The carriage rolled along a dirt forest path. Herdia's maid said that the Queen Dowager wanted the lady to visit her residence. The woman said that it was a rather unexpected proposal, and she reminded that it would be necessary to observe the rules of decency in relation to the Queen. Herdia's maid reminded her that Lady Allison was not yet Queen. An argument began, which Rihanna herself stopped by shouting at both maids, and the girl agreed to visit the Dowager Queen. She assured that she herself would like to meet with her. She gave orders to Lady Cecily to note all her planned affairs, and she said that she accepted the invitation. The maid was surprised by this decision of Her Majesty. Rihanna said goodbye to her confidant in the garden. She promised that she would return today. She asked her not to worry about her. Soon the carriage was already rolling along the stone-paved road into the distance. Lady Cecily decided that it was urgent to inform His Majesty about this. Further events unfolded in the summer palace. Rihanna made a deep curtsy to greet Her Majesty. I asked how she was doing. Herdia opened her arms to the girl, urging Rihanna to hurry through. The woman hugged the blonde. She said that they had not seen each other for a long time, and the girl had grown a lot since then. Rihanna responded by insisting that she also missed her very much. The girl said that 6 whole years had passed since then, and she regretted that then she had to leave so suddenly. Hertzia said that she was greatly surprised by the news about Count Alanisson, but she was even more surprised by Rihanna's persistence. After all, she couldn't even imagine that a little girl could have such a character. The girl, laughing, retorted that angels and demons fight inside every person. The woman agreed that people tended to love and hate something at the same time. She assured that this also applied to Igor. This became a discovery for our heroine. Hertzia and her guest were sitting on the sofa. The queen asked if she knew what had happened during this time in Arendelle. Rihanna placed her hands on the woman's arms. She suggested that she must have had a hard time there. The woman playfully sighed and said that she was still just as sweet and kind. And she remembered that Anastasia had also consoled her before. And now Hertzia, with pain in her soul and bitterness in her words, said, closing her eyes, that she would really like to return to those times when Igor was still a sweet child. Rihanna felt sorry for her, and the woman, wiping away a tear, offered to look at her, and she reproached herself for talking about empty things in front of such a long-awaited guest. The maid entered without a report. She informed Her Majesty that the table had already been set in the garden. Herdia was sitting on the sofa, and the girl was holding her hand. The queen said that very beautiful roses grew this year, and she remembered how she and Rihanna's mother used to spend a lot of time in the garden. "Events take us to the minister's castle," Bailey's shouted, repeating what they had just said. The man said that the most terrible killer of the empire was now hiding here. His Majesty Bailey's and the minister were confused by such a statement. The man asked why he was not told about this earlier. He was surprised why they didn't tell him about the smugglers when they were looking for them a few years ago. Igor was interested in what such a statement was based on, and he doubted that they had come all this way based on rumors alone. The employees looked at each other silently. Then one of them passed a small box from hand to Bales. The guy carried it to His Majesty's table. When Igor opened it, he was very surprised by its contents. A glass vessel lay on a velvet cloth. Hertzia and Rihanna walked through the garden. The queen assured her future daughter-in-law that her son sometimes did stupid things. The girl sincerely admitted that she would not have thought that he could do something like that. The queen said that now Igor is pretending to be good, and she assumed that he was now proud that he had defeated a country that was the strongest enemy power. She crushed the rose flower in her hand. The woman was sure that her son was in a hurry. Herdia doubted whether Crichton would maintain good relations with them after such an insult, and she really hoped that they would not become enemies now. And Rihanna couldn't understand why the Queen Dowager was so unwilling to give up her relationship with Crichton that she decided to feud with Igor. The girl asked the queen in surprise if she really wanted Arundel to obey Crichton. Herdia asked if the girl thought that the queen was ready to betray her homeland. Rihanna said she wouldn't want anything like that to happen. The queen said philosophically that she had nothing more to hide, and she said that the girl was right, and that was not all she wanted. A woman poked Rihanna with a rose flower, and she said that she wants her son to rule 2 countries. Herdia was confident that they would then be able to build a great empire that could resist Toulouse. The girl considered this impossible. After all, Crichton already had a crown prince who already had a lot of power, and they had many other contenders for the throne. The queen said that all this was true, but now it was all over, and after the war with Crichton, her dream became unattainable. Igor angrily insisted that this was not a dream at all, and he reproached his mother for her stupid selfishness. Rihanna was surprised how the guy ended up here. The queen was more annoyed than surprised. The girl hurried to approach the groom. He roughly grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him with force. Herdia screamed at her son and demanded that he explain what it all meant. In response, he demanded that his mother first explain her words, and he was angry that she dared to invite his people here without his permission. The queen was angry that she was being treated this way, and she insisted that she just wanted to see her goddaughter. Igor shouted that first of all she was his wife, and only then her goddaughter. The king pressed the girl's head to his chest as if trying to cover her with his body. The guy was surprised that his mother still considered him her puppet. It seemed that lightning would flash between them, but they wouldn't notice it at all. Passions were running high. Rihanna thought with fear that she had never seen Igor like this before. He hugged the bride with one hand. Herdia was angry that this was all that the son wanted to say to his own mother, whom he had not seen for so long. The guy insisted that he would not have told her anything if she had not brought his wife here by force. The queen demanded that her son ask Rihanna if she came here of her own free will. The girl thought in fear that if things continued like this, there would remain a misunderstanding, and she decided to act. Although she understood that he was most likely angry with her now, Rihanna tried to say something to His Majesty, but he did not listen to her. He said apologetically that the argument was just between him and his mother. Igor promised to listen to her later. The girl realized that Igor was not angry with her. Hertia asked her son why he treated her this way and what was the reason for it. The queen asked him if he had not already taken everything from her. She said she did so much for him. The young king was sure that all this was not for him, and he assured his mother that she was lucky that today everything ended this way. He warned that if this happened again, the ending would be different, and he advised his mother not to forget his last warning. Hertia seemed petrified by these words. Meanwhile, Igor grabbed the girl tightly by the hand and tried to get away from here as quickly as possible. A carriage drawn by a pair of white horses was driving along the road. It was already evening time. It was getting dark. Igor and Rihanna drove for a long time in silence, without uttering a single word. The girl thought with annoyance that for some reason everything had become much worse. The guy was the first to break the silence. He asked him to forgive him. He insisted that he wanted to take her away from there without too much fuss. But he didn't expect to run into his mother. Rihanna insisted that she paid a visit to the Dowager Queen because she sent her maid to pick her up. And that's why it was difficult to refuse. The king said that he knew everything, that Lady Cecily had already explained everything to him by sending an urgent message. Igor asked the girl what his mother told her. Rihanna responded that she was basically expressing her regret that everything turned out this way, and she spoke a little about His Majesty and her childhood. The guy corrected the bride so that she called him by name, and he reminded her that she had previously promised to call him that. The girl, looking away, confirmed that she remembered this promise. She asked the groom why he treated his mother this way. Igor honestly admitted that he was simply afraid to be alone with her. The girl asked what it all meant. The young king said that under the pressure of emotions, people can do stupid things. And sometimes you have to pay for it with someone's life. But all this affected everyone else. So often the story did not end with one death. The guy sadly assured that he had learned this wise truth thanks to his mother. Rihanna saw how much the king tried to contain his emotions, and she assumed that his mother's greed had caused him to close his heart to the world. She remembered the queen's words that she wanted her son to rule 2 countries at the same time. Igor exhaled, trying to relax a little. He said that he knew that it was difficult to understand, but he wanted Rihanna to know it. The girl was surprised that the king was afraid of this. He confirmed that he had been afraid of this since his childhood, and he thought to himself that what he was most afraid of was that he would never be able to see Rihanna herself again. The blonde sadly lowered her eyes and suggested that maybe Igor was just lonely. The king said that she understood him correctly, and that he actually used to be lonely. Rihanna realized that His Majesty had to do everything on his own to gain power. Early in the morning, festive bells were ringing in the church. The weather was pleasant. The blue sky was only slightly broken by light clouds. Today Rihanna was dressed as a bride. Lace, jewelry, flowers. Everything perfectly complemented the tenderness and beauty of the girl herself. The king admired his bride. He realized that he was now strong enough, and other people will not begin to trust him until he trusts them himself. The guests applauded and congratulated His Majesty. Igor mentally promised to trust the girl's choice from now on. They were both already standing in front of the altar. The priest asked whether the newlyweds swear in the face of God to be honest with each other until the end of their days. The newlyweds said traditional vows to each other. Igor told his wife that on this day he trusted her completely and completely. I asked if she could do the same. Rihanna answered him, yes. The young king, looking into the eyes of his chosen one, put a wedding ring on the ring finger of her left hand. Igor asked the girl if she agreed to tell him only the truth. She looked into his eyes and answered that she agreed. A long, passionate, and at the same time tender kiss sealed the newlyweds' vow. Rihanna thanked the heavens that the man who had previously cheated on her was now being nice to her. She remembered that in his previous life he was completely different, but now he had changed a lot. The husband called her with him, holding out his hand. The girl thought that if it was all just her imagination, then she wouldn't be able to relive it all again. The king and his wife went out onto the balcony. The people below greeted the monarch with his wedding with their shouts. People shouted, "Glory to Arendelle." Everyone had happy faces and high spirits today. So, 6 years later, Rihanna Cheska returned to Arendelle and became its queen. The girl and her husband smiled and joyfully waved to the people, congratulating them from the balcony. Cheerful music flowed at the wedding ball. Couples danced, waltzing around the banquet hall of the royal palace. Then an older blonde man with a mustache appeared. The man stood quietly and smiled. Our heroine was incredibly happy about her uncle's arrival. Soon the family hugged each other tightly. The girl asked without letting go of the Marquise's embrace when he arrived. The uncle replied that he arrived at night and was almost late for the wedding. The bride asked about Dima, whether he had arrived with his uncle. The man hesitated a little. Rihanna understood everything without words. She said she thought he was still angry at her about that decision. The Marquise said that this was not so at all. I asked my niece not to worry, and he assured that Dima asked to tell her that he wished her only happiness. The man called the girl Ria in a family way. He saw the sadness on her face and asked if she was really okay. The girl assured that she was absolutely fine. She said that the king was kind to her and that she was surrounded by many good people. She asked not to worry about her. The Marquis mentally addressed his late sister. "Anastasia, do you see her? How beautiful your daughter has grown up. She looks so much like you." The uncle held Rihanna's hands, and he said that she was much more beautiful than he imagined, and he asked her for forgiveness. A maid approached them. She informed Her Majesty that it was time to go. Rihanna nodded curtly in response that she understood everything. The girl said goodbye to her uncle, and she said that she would see each other again tomorrow at a meeting with the delegation from Crichton. Rihanna sat alone in the king's bedroom. She was dressed in sleepwear with a shawl over her shoulders. The girl recalled with some fear how her wedding night took place in a past life. Lily Cecil told the anxious and sad newlywed that the king would come soon. The girl thought that witnesses would come with him. The woman knelt next to Rihanna. She affectionately asked Her Majesty if she remembered what they talked about yesterday, that the first time was always painful for a woman, but the newlywed needed to share a bed for the marriage to be consummated. She assured that she could not avoid it, even if it was scary. The girl thought that in a past life she had been told that without consummation the marriage would be declared invalid. She realized how stupid she was then. Igor then told his wife that a woman should endure, even if she didn't like it. And he said that if she refused, their marriage would be over. She thought that Igor had no intention of breaking off their marriage, and because of the Queen Dowager's words, she misunderstood everything. But now there was a good relationship between the spouses, and the girl was not going to reject her husband, and I really hoped that everything would go well. She told the woman that she understood everything herself. Lady Cecile assured that the girl would not always be in pain. She said that after this night, relief would immediately come, and she said that Her Majesty would soon find out everything herself. It seemed that this topic brought back memories of the lady about her honeymoon, and Rihanna herself did not have such good memories of that time. The woman began to dance around the newlywed, surprising her. Why was she suddenly so happy? And Lady Cecile said that at that time she was flying in the clouds, that those were hot nights. She told the girl that she and her husband approached that issue very responsibly. Rihanna laughed cheerfully, relaxing a little from her stories about her youth. But then His Majesty the King arrived. He was accompanied by 2 of his close servants. He was wearing a loose suit with a robe thrown over it, tied with a belt. The servants and attendants wished Their Majesty the King and Queen that Atraxia would bless them that night. The doors to the bedroom closed. The newlyweds were left alone. They were silent for some time. Igor was the first to break the silence. He scratched his neck out of awkwardness, trying to cope with his excitement, and he admitted to his wife that he was a little nervous, inviting her to drink a glass of wine with him. Rihanna was sitting on the edge of the bed. The king slowly uncorked a bottle of red wine. Soon the intoxicating grape drink poured into the glass. The girl asked where everyone else had gone. The king assumed that everyone was still having fun at the ball. Rihanna was surprised. The husband explained to her that there is no custom with witnesses during the first wedding night. He got rid of it. Igor said that the royal marriage always meant a lot, but with his power there was no need to worry about this anymore. After all, the king's word was law. He held the glass in his hand and smiled, and he said that this only proved how much his power had grown in the country and abroad. Rihanna drank wine. She agreed that her husband had done a lot of work. Igor said that the man she married today was a special person. The newlywed replied that she had already realized his peculiarity, and the fact that she was here only confirmed this. Rihanna said that the king wanted the princess as a hostage, and this was almost no different from the ancient custom of bride kidnapping. Igor understood from the way his wife's tongue loosened that she was already too drunk, and he took the glass with the remaining wine from her hands. This angered Rihanna. The king said that he suggested a drink to relax a little and not to get drunk into oblivion. Our heroine began to feel awkward. Her husband approached her and knelt down in front of her. He gently stroked his chosen one on the cheek and neck, and she felt pleasant feelings. Igor admitted that his methods were quite harsh, and this could really be mistaken for bride kidnapping, so he wanted to give her a choice. The king said that Rihanna may not sleep with him today. He played with a strand of her blonde hair. The girl recalled that a marriage was considered invalid if there was no wedding night. Igor smiled at his chosen one. He said that he had more power than the witnesses, that they will take his word for it, and the evidence could have been falsified. Rihanna recalled that it was she who insisted on marriage. The husband asked her to think it over carefully before giving an answer. He assured that he would not insist. The newlywed was going to fulfill all her duties. And even now, she did not go back on her words. The girl asked her husband to hug her. Igor watched in surprise as she took off her robe, exposing her shoulders and décolleté. Soon the newlywed took the position on top. He held his wife's chin and looked into her eyes. When their faces came closer, their lips met in a long and heartfelt kiss. The guy held his partner by the back of her head and did not look away from her. When he broke away from Rihanna, he said, looking into her eyes, that it was crazy. The girl thought that in a past life she and her husband were also together. But he had never kissed her so passionately. Igor caressed his wife. He told himself that he would be affectionate, gentle, and loving. He did not want to put pressure on his partner as he had done in his previous life. The couple was kissing. The partner caressed the girl on the thigh. It was becoming increasingly difficult for him to restrain himself. When Igor again rose above the newlywed, she asked him to wait and pulled him away from her. She was suddenly overcome by fear and uncertainty, typical of inexperienced girls. The guy hugged Rihanna, pressing against her side. He asked her to relax, and he promised that he would not cause harm. The king took possession of his wife and froze, trembling. The girl squeezed his body with her arms and legs. Igor playfully said that he would have problems later. And Lady Cecily is angry with him because his wife had to ask him several times to be more gentle. The king, smiling, asked whether his wife was in pain now, and will she be able to handle it? The girl thought that in his previous life he only expressed his anger, but now he treated her so warmly and tenderly. She could not understand where she had made a mistake in her past life. The guy gently stroked his beloved's cheek, wiping away her tears, and in a gentle voice he said that now he could not ease her pain. When the king woke up in the morning, he decided to talk to Rihanna. He said he wanted to stay with her forever. Igor grew up and had no intention of following his mother's orders. The guy wanted to choose for himself with whom to build a relationship. He was no longer the child who climbed the tree as a child. Igor did everything to become independent. He became completely different from what he was in his previous life. Now the king could be with the woman he likes. He hugged her tenderly, and she couldn't believe that the king really liked him. This meant that he would no longer communicate with other girls. If Igor did not remember his past life, he would hardly understand his wife's thoughts now. But he remembered her. Therefore, he assured the girl that while she was his wife, he would not build relationships with other women. The guy asked Rihanna not to worry about it. Now he wanted his wife to be able to freely talk to him about the topics that concern her, and he could kiss her freely. The guy wanted now to start every day with such a pleasant greeting. A month after the wedding, the girl was already accustomed to talking with her husband about simple things. She was used to them having lunch and breakfast together. Rihanna didn't even know it was possible to live so calmly. For example, talk about cricket competitions. And by the way, the girl really wanted to participate in them, so she freely told her husband about it. At Crichton, she really enjoyed the game. She was taught to play by her cousin Dima, who constantly won competitions. But it is unlikely that anyone will beat the girl at Arundel, no matter how many people come to the competition. After breakfast, Igor kissed Rihanna's hand and suggested they be alone again, as husband and wife, not as king and queen. By lunchtime, the competition began. According to tradition, the king and queen were supposed to be on different teams. If they were on the same team, then everyone would serve them. The queen's team began to win. The king's defeat was obvious to everyone. But after the game, the guy again hoped to be with the queen. One of the players threw the ball into a hard-to-reach place. It's good that he didn't fall into the water. The girl decided to call people so that they could pull out the ball. But it was not the ball that fell into the water, but she. She fell and began to sink to the bottom of the river. The water overwhelmed her and she sank lower and lower. At that moment, the girl asked herself the question, who she really is. And indeed, which of these lives she lived was hard to say.